Far away in a castle, they summoned something from another world. Steam hissed through the large room. A crowd of people appeared in the center of the room. They had no idea what kind of place it was or how they had ended up there. A girl in a school uniform, frightened, said she had been on her way to school just a minute ago and now found herself in an unfamiliar place. Years of fighting demons have left the kingdom with heavy losses, and it now stands on the brink of national disaster. So they summoned people from another world who had been given powers to help fight their enemies. Those who answered the king's call did an excellent job and became the 18th generation of great heroes. A crowd of strangers doesn't understand what's happening, and all they care about right now is why these people are called heroes. People across the kingdom want to test their skills. Among the crowd is a girl with a rare ability called Divine Scythe. When people saw the schoolgirl's abilities, they were surprised and praised the skill as a true success. The girl was surprised when the magician pointed at her and drew everyone's attention. As they looked at the others, they noticed someone else with a rare skill. They call these skills powers granted by the gods when people were sent to another world. The king declares that skills cannot be given to his world's representatives. They are a blessing from the gods. These people were summoned from another world with divine gifts to serve the gods and are called heroes. Confused but joyful, the crowd watches as heroes with certain powers are called to a completely different world. A kingdom resident interrupted before Lady Momoko could deny it, claiming she possesses the divine scythe skill that can erase high-level demons with a single swing. Pleased, the king notices many others in the group have useful skills, and one subordinate calls to His Excellency that the summoned ones are especially impressive this time. Calling him my lord, the robed man introduces the summoned Norio Itanami, says the hero has no abilities, and the character window confirms the boy truly has none. After noticing Itanami, the king remained silent, and the young man, in an awkward position, waited for his lord's reaction. The city hums with people moving about, streaming down into the underground passage to the metro, while rows of multi-story office buildings rise like massive walls. Itanami Norio sighs, thinking about another day as a corporate slave as he steps onto an already packed subway, feeling this is not where he wants to be. Finding the carriage packed, he angrily forces his way inside so he does not have to wait for the next train. His nose hits something soft that turns out to be a plump man. Scanning his surroundings, he tries to find where he is. A man introduces himself as God. Autonomy could think of nothing but his own death. God says the boy was called to another world. His father Zeus chose him, the king of the gods. Athena is their administrator, but the other gods complained she discriminated against men, so a plump man takes care of the clueless items. Norio asks again about the summoning administrator. The boy does not realize what is happening. The god introduces himself as Festus, skilled at such things. Festus grants the boy an unusual skill. It was Hephaestus's first time giving someone a skill, so he prepared as much as he could. Autonomy, nervous about receiving the skill, said that if it were something great, he might not be able to accept it. Hephaestus offers the skill he created, Master of Excellence. Reaching out, he holds a glittering sphere. Norio is clearly unimpressed by the divine gift. The man admitted the skill was hard to use, but assured the boy he could handle it. Those words sent the Itans into even greater panic. Hephaestus presses the sphere to the young man's chest and says he poured his heart into creating the skill Master of Excellence, and the young man asks to use it to the fullest in his new world. The boy remembered the conversation with God the night before he arrived in another world. People panicked because the summoned person had no skills at all, and this had never happened before. Itanami turns to the king, thinking humans' lack of skill is a problem and they will not be able to fight demons. Noriel tried to ask the king something, but the king shouted for everyone to be quiet. Mellard spoke up ahead of time and said no one would be able to return. Reluctant to ask, the boy stayed silent, but Momoko panicked and repeated his fear that he could not send them back, and Mollard replied that they can summon heroes to their world but do not know how to send them home. Only the Demon King knows the way back, so the heroes must go to the front and defeat his army, and Utanami says he cannot fight in the war without his powers, which makes him useless. Enweri then asked for a piece of land so he could change his life, saying he felt useless in the kingdom, and his request stunned the king. Distance from the kingdom doesn't matter to him, and once he secures the land, he can live alone away from everyone. Unable to return, the boy decides to leave the life of a corporate slave behind. Confident, he plans to begin a second life in this world. The king's aides are stunned by the summoned hero's audacity, since he has no powers. Itanami stands with the guide before the desert expanse, the sand stretching in every direction, and from this moment the boy takes control. The man says His Highness bought this for Nauri and also paid his salary. The young man will be able to live here as he pleases. Being knighted and given uncharted land meant it wasn't part of the kingdom, and Itami doesn't fully understand that it's normal for a king to buy land for a hero. The guide says this is wonderful. Anything outside the kingdom isn't its territory. Since the kingdom hasn't explored the place, the boy won't have to pay the king. Itanami is clearly pleased because he can farm freely, and then the man holds out his hand in a begging gesture and demands payment for the trip he gave the young man. After receiving the payment, the guide leaves, saying the kingdom will ask nothing more of him and telling him to go do whatever he wants, whether the boy lives or dies. As Nari says goodbye, she feels bad that they're paying for him because the young man lacks the skills they so badly need in the war against the demons. Standing before a valley of deserted fields, I feel a new life beginning here and now. Most stories follow someone who sets out on a great adventure, teams up to face hardship, defeats the strongest enemy, and wins fame, but the boy doesn't need any of that. Setting out on his journey, Yutani sees the king and his subjects as desperate people, and as he walks among the empty boulders he decides he can live peacefully like this and promises himself to enjoy a quiet life in this new world. The boy does not want to see them again, so he wants to find a place as far from the kingdom as he can. Standing by the sea, he enjoys the breeze and believes there is nowhere better to be. Waving his hands with joy, he felt a rush of freedom and shouted that he would stay and make this place his own kingdom. First, Nori wants to make sure he has water so it won't be a problem later, and he sat on the rocks by the water to taste it because he thinks it's seawater. Scooping a little water into his palm, the young man tasted it at once. It proved to be fresh like water and drinkable. Delighted, he saw the tentacles of a sea creature sticking out from under the stones in the water, and then remembered octopuses do not live in shallow or fresh water. He isn't interested in that anymore because the priority isn't finding the octopus in the so-called lake. Securing food for the near future is urgent. Gripping the tentacles to pull the creature free, he began to slide toward the water because the surface gave his shoes no traction. After falling under the water, Itunami surfaces with his eyes wide open and the same octopus still on his head. When he stood fully upright, the water seemed very salty, which surprised him because when he tasted it, it was ordinary and fresh. Itunami decided to confirm his suspicions and scooped water into his cupped hands again. An octopus perched on his head, the man drank some water and realized once again that it was still drinkable. Smiling, he calls the new world amazing. When he came out of the water, he realized there would be no problems. Removing the octopus from his head, the boy now thinks only about food. Itanami drops the sea creature into the container and, finding he has no seasonings, decides to cook the octopus in salt water. Nori prepares to light his first fire, using a hunting knife to cut a hole in a dry wooden stick and make a notch. He will insert the stick into the depression and rub until coals form from friction, then transfer the coals to the brushwood prepared in advance. Itanami exhaled, gathering every ounce of strength to pour his soul into the first fire he had ever created. Getting to work, the boy twirled the stick between his palms at furious speed, putting in a lot of effort, and on his first try the flame flared up, which greatly frightened the autonomy and surprised him. A sea creature is boiling in a pot over a lit fire. Nori made a plate and chopsticks, and while eating an octopus tentacle, Itanami only thought about how quickly the fire ignited. Grinning, the boy felt proud of his survival skills and then remembered Hephaestus, the god of the hearth, saying the young man's ability is a superior skill. Thinking over the man's words, Enweri went to stand in front of a field full of plants to confirm something. Swinging his sickle arm, he shouts to activate his Master of Supremacy ability. A huge strip tore along the arc of his swing, destroying everything in its path. Autonomy had no words for it. He felt he wasn't capable of that. The Hephaestus did not fully describe the ability he granted. After that, he seemed to understand what a good life was, so he took a hoe and tried the same thing he had done with the sickle, and when he stuck it into the ground, the same thing happened, leaving Noir both shocked and delighted by what he could do. Bending down, he checked the land after using the skill. It had been plowed so well that he did not need to do anything else. The bed turned out so large because he had pictured it that way. Itanami concludes that the mastery he received from Hephaestus multiplies the effectiveness of everything the boy holds. The young man realized this ability would make farming easy and improve his harvest. He kept working instead of sitting idle. In his garden, he planted strange seeds he had brought from the city. Nari stands beside his beds, breathing a sigh of relief. Proud of his work, he still doesn't know what he planted. If they grow and he can harvest them, he won't have to worry about food. There are even worms in the soil. Because the plants would take time to grow, the young man went fishing so he would have something for dinner. Itanami sits on the shore, enjoying his time fishing. He thinks life would last longer if he worked for the company, but thanks to her Hephaestus, the boy can control the waves. Grateful, the boy thanks Hephaestus for this wonderful skill. One day Noir will have seaweed and rice. At that dreamlike moment, the man's fishing rod got a bite. He began to pull the line toward him with all his strength. The strain on the line told him something huge was on the hook. A long-haired girl emerged from the water and took the bait. Itanami clearly hadn't expected that. Stunned by what's happening, he pulls the fishing rod harder, losing control of the process. After all, he caught a girl, not the fish he wanted for dinner. Wrapped in fishing line, she revealed a tail, and he realized she was a real mermaid. He snapped back to reality when a mermaid interrupted, calling him a peasant in a mocking tone. She was furious that he had fished her out like that, and he did not dare to argue because he thought she was hostile. Insisting that since he caught her, he must marry her, the girl points to the rules of the new world. Itans was fed up with the statement because the distance between them suddenly dropped to zero. He just married a woman in another world. The mermaid feels humiliated after being captured by a hillbilly. For a merfolk like her, nothing is more humiliating. Now she has been exiled as a mermaid. The loser surrenders his body and heart to the winner. Sitting still with the hook in her mouth, she cries because autonomy caught her, which is very different from what the boy imagined. Once she got the problem out of her mouth, the mermaid began to cry because she felt ashamed and couldn't go back to how things were. Noiri wanted to point out that the girl had been caught on the fishing hook herself, but the girl refused to listen. Mermaids are proud and hate humans and other living creatures. The man has no choice but to do something about it. She screams at him, stunned that a mermaid like her could be pulled ashore by someone like him. Her pride is hurt, and now she cannot return to the sea. The mermaid keeps shouting that it's karma and she has no choice but to be his wife. From now on, autonomy must take responsibility for her. This is unfamiliar to the young man, and he has heard that in his world marriages between different species are harder. Looking at the girl's tale, he concluded he was unlikely to get married. He thought her thoughts would not come true. She pulled out a bottle of strange liquid and drank it in small sips. A sudden bright light from the girl's side blinded the boy after she drank the elixir. The mermaid's tail slowly becomes human legs, and the man stares in shock before turning away in embarrassment because the girl, now with legs instead of a tail, is bare from the waist down. The mermaid proudly says she will not be happy living on Earth, but now she has a chance to have a child, and after that the boy will not complain about her. Tsunami shouts that he understands everything and asks to be covered. The young man realizes he panicked and accepted everything without thinking. Now all he has is an empty field, and the girl does not like the clothes Enwari gave her. She was outraged when he shouted he would not marry her if she refused to wear pants. Standing by the flower beds, Hitanami tells her he can only make clothes she likes, but he has no home right now. A young man came to plow the field. They noticed sprouts that appeared shortly after. Sprouts appeared in every bed, surprising the boy and his future wife who stood nearby. He wondered if this was one of the abilities he had been given back then, and if he remembered correctly, the man had said he gave him supreme power with a variety of tools. The girl grew curious about what her new husband was growing. He did not know if he had planted fruit or vegetables, so he came here to take a look. The young man says he wants a simple life. The girl calls the landowner a nuisance. Itanami says he knows nothing about fish. She then says she understands her husband only wants to live in peace. Noir mockingly insists she's certain, then proudly and solemnly tells others to rely on her. Healing is the mermaid's innate power, and the girl is skilled in healing magic. The young man didn't follow the discussion, and his confusion irritated her. Speaking with pride and enthusiasm, she tells him not to be shy about asking her if he doesn't know something. She then began to take off her pants, which greatly embarrassed Utanami. She ran to the water, said she would grab some things from the house, then jumped in and turned back into a mermaid. I had to watch, wondering what had happened. He walked into the forest, convinced the mermaid truly wanted to be his wife. All he really wanted was to get away from the hustle and bustle of life. Itanami took a small hatchet, knowing there was no guarantee she would return, and immediately began chopping down a tree to build a simple house. Soon the boy looks at his creation with pride and enjoys its simple design in pleasant solitude. He is thrilled. He never imagined he could build a house in just an hour. Enwari calls himself a real man. Sprawled on the bed, he rests. Even with the abilities Hephaestus gave him, he still finds it tiring. Resting after a long day, Itani figured the mermaid joining him explained his weakness, and remembering her he concluded she would not return. Nori slept soundly on his new bed when the girl came back, and her appearance woke him as the mermaid ran into his arms happily, naked below the waist after drinking the same elixir. Autonomy, confused, ordered her to put her trousers back on, which made the girl unhappy because she does not like them. He asked where she'd been all day. Worry showed on the young man's face. She looked at him and turned away without a word. Crossing her arms over her chest, the mermaid says that in the end this is not a human matter. In her view, commoners don't care about anything. Leaving the house, she told him she was having trouble cooking. The word cooking drew the Eaton's attention. They stood in front of a large shaitan. A machine called an aggregate was used to make a magical medicine. Beaming, the girl says that mixing a little magic with different potions creates a magical medicine with different effects, and she demonstrates it for people without magic. Itanami asked her about the cold medicine. The girl said proudly she would do it later, once all the preparations were done. Running to fetch something she needed, the mermaid heard the young man tell her to be careful, and he meant to threaten her for lying, but he had no time to say anything because she returned holding a huge fish. The tuna is named Boenji. Its flesh is rich in mana. Nori understands none of it. He is surprised not by its magic, but by how large the fish is. The girl cuts the fish into pieces using only one hand. Itanami thinks of her hands as swords. The mermaid began to cook. She brought the water to a boil, adjusted the pressure, and kept it steady. Grind the ingredient into a powder. Moments later, the girl shows off fertilizer made from the Boenji fish, and Wary feels uneasy that it's fish fertilizer. If the boy spread this fertilizer on his farm, they could harvest faster. The mermaid happily got down to work. Itonami wondered about the mermaid's intentions because she really wanted to help him cultivate the fields. By the next day, every plant is bearing fruit. Both are surprised by the effect of the fish fertilizer. The young man had already placed wooden pegs beside the plants. He picked a tomato from the bush and decided to taste it. Itans really enjoy the taste of vegetables. He calls the girl a very unusual mermaid. San still watches the young man's behavior wearily. The girl picked a tomato from the bush and decided to try it too. After one bite, she slumped silently. Nori started to soothe her, since mermaids might not like that kind of food. He was wrong because his future wife really liked it. She was surprised that people on Earth eat such foods every day. The mermaid pulled the carrot from the ground, intending to try it as well and enjoy the taste again, but a different one. Itanami stopped her, explaining there are different kinds of vegetables, and some must be cooked before they can be eaten. The girl complains that it's all too much trouble and is acting spoiled because she wants to eat more vegetables. Nwari began cooking the food in the seawater. The mermaids sit on a rock near the soup vat. He offered her the plate so she could try how the same vegetables tasted together. Worried the mermaid might not like what he cooked, Itanami watched as she tasted the soup and looked happy because it was very tasty. Serving himself some soup, the young man is clearly happy and wishes it could be like this every day. Still enjoying the food, the girl asks her future husband whether people always eat such delicious food. Itanami says it's not like that and suggests adding meat to the soup, and if possible, creating a signature spice to make the dish tastier. The mermaid is surprised that food already delicious can taste even better. Nori says this happens when you add seasonings. Prepare the spices first. He wants miso and soy sauce for cooking because he already has meat. Smiling, the boy says he needs equipment too. Itanami enjoys the taste of these vegetables so much he drifts into his mysterious world of pleasure. Suddenly he realized he still didn't know the girl's name, and the mermaid who had turned into a human was called Platty. Ito wanted to say his name, but he figured that being in another world he might need to change it. Smiling, Itanami introduced himself as Kedin and said he was glad to meet her. Platty slurps the chopped food, stares at her husband, and enjoys it, so begins everyday life with a mermaid. Itanami Nori, now called Kitten, came from another world and has begun a new life with a mermaid wife. Sitting on the floor, the boy rubs his sore back from sleeping there. Noticing the Platty was no longer in bed, he figured she had woken before him. Though she looks human, she is still a mermaid. The man wondered whether a girl could sleep on a board and felt puzzled because it looked like a fish sleeping on a cutting board. Kitten hoped the mermaid was not angry with him for catching her with his hook, so to stop worrying, he decided to ask her about it. Just as the boy was about to leave the house, Platty let out a sharp scream that scattered all the nearby birds. Keaton asked her what had happened. Platty shouted that someone was in the fields and pointed to a straw-scarer crow in a hat with wooden hands. He breathed a sigh of relief and said it was only a scarecrow, the first one he had ever made. Kitten says it is artificial, its upper limbs can move, and its fingertips are fitted with wooden swords, and he adds that this scares away birds that damage the crops. She thinks it's a scarecrow that moves to scare the birds, but the man laughs and says it doesn't work like that and scarecrows can't move. Standing before the girl, he says that placing him in the middle of the field will make the birds think he is a man and leave the crops alone. He did not notice that the same scarecrow behind his back was waving its wooden swords. The girl told him about it. Turning around, he watches the creation he made dance, dumbfounded. He had not expected that because he had only built it as a simple scarecrow to scare away birds. Kitten stood with his mouth open, amazed that they were actually moving. The girl had expected the scarecrow to move, so she was surprised. This shouldn't be happening. Looking at his hand, he wondered if his strength was the cause. Platty grew curious when her new husband kept staring at his palm, and then he admitted he had been summoned by a god from another world and was a stranger here. Kidding thought about the scarecrow's behavior and was certain the cause was the scarecrow's god-given power. The girl realized he is a summoned hero. The boy is surprised she knows this. Platty crosses her arms proudly and says she knew, explaining that every era performed a summoning ritual to bring a hero from another world. She still wondered about the boy, because heroes must fight demons for the sake of humanity, and the boy, his cheeks flushed, agrees with her. Rolling her eyes, she asks what a hero is doing in a place like this, where they are now. Sitting down next to the crops, a happy cat calmly explains that he does not want to be a hero and is hiding here. The mermaid finds this strange too. The boy doesn't seem to care. He is happy holding a ripe vegetable in his hand. He listens to the girl speak. Plattyfish says he seemed to belong to a tribe used to living together. People from other worlds are usually weak, so anyone alone will be killed immediately by a monster. The boy does not deny what his wife said. Although she thought he was special, he denied it as he sat beside the tall bushes. Smiling and holding a tomato, he reminded the mermaid that he does not live alone but lives with her. Platty wondered whether he was really strong or weak and couldn't make sense of it, while behind her a man enjoyed a fresh, ripe tomato for breakfast. Still squatting, he said he'd noticed her leaving that morning and thought something had happened to her. The question stunned Plattyfish. The boy had really embarrassed her, and she was clearly a little embarrassed to answer. She shouts back that she is going to the toilet, of course, and is surprised that people from Earth are so curious, while Keaton only shrugged in embarrassment. He decided to ask where she went when she needed to use the toilet, but did not need an answer because he had already guessed she went to the sea. After a moment of silence, he took in the situation, sat on the ground, and knew he had to dig a hole for a makeshift toilet, but he had overlooked one important thing while trying to survive. Alone, people are very vulnerable, and even a small insect can threaten them, not to mention wild animals, so he is lucky to live with Platty now and feels deep relief inside. Suddenly, he wondered what the girl thought about this matter, how she felt about the time they spent together. Platty, who had been leaving earlier, held out a plate to show off the starfish. Kitten asked what was on the plate, and the girl said it was a type of sea monster that absorbs all organic matter floating in the sea and is also called a sea cleaner. Plattyfish also says these creatures can purify water, but the boy does not quite understand the nature of these sea monsters. To demonstrate the sea cleaner's work, she pulled out her penknife, cut her forearm, and poured her blood into a container of starfish, leaving Keaton shocked. Platty, a proud look on his face, tells him to watch the sea monster at work, the sea cleaner. The cadet grabs the girl's forearm, squeezing the arteries, then yells at her for what he did, while Platia looks at him with an innocent face and says nothing as the guy tries to stop the bleeding. Upset, the boy tells her to stop and says he is very worried about her, then calms down, admits he is shy and insensitive, and apologizes for his behavior. Kitten's anxiety comes from the power God gave him, so he's always worried, and when Platty faces him, she says she likes him very much and denies what he said. Now his wife, she promises to always support him. Kitten looks surprised and embarrassed by her words. The mermaid thought he opposed it, but he did not. She crossed her arms again and said proudly that a wife's role is to support her husband. Smiling, he turned to her and thanked her. She turned away with her nose in the air, silent and embarrassed. The toilet was built and another life problem was solved. Plattyfish reminded her it was time for breakfast. Far beyond the wide sea of this world, terrible sounds come from a rocky cave. The demon deep in the cave's darkness senses an ominous shift as something approaches. Platty called Gideon to show her new outfit, having made a skirt from a piece of fabric instead of trousers after wearing trousers yesterday, and as she spun in front of him, she said she had tried to remake the furoshiki from her luggage. Hesitating and stammering, he wanted to say it was not worth it, but the girl told him not to worry. The mermaid readily declares that a wife's duty is to be beautiful for her husband and sees nothing strange about it. Holding a work briefcase, the girl said she had left a long time ago. The man did not understand what she meant or where she had gone. Perking up her ears and smiling, she told Kitten she had found a dungeon. The boy pictured a dungeon as a place to find treasure, an underground shop, or a site to fight a terrible evil, with the top floor as the boss's resting place. He pressed Plattyfish about what the dungeon was like, and she said it was easier to see than to describe, urging him to hurry. They reached the very rocky cave, which lay in a completely different direction from where they lived. Kedon was exhausted after walking 2 hours to reach the cave. Platty discovered the dungeon while working in the field. It is a cave-type dungeon. These dungeons form where mana flows, though this one looks like a normal cave. The unsuspecting young man was swept up by a gust of wind that seemed to drag him into the dungeon. Kitten felt an unseen giant beast licking his whole face. Plate was puzzled by Kitten's expression. It was strange and surprising. Energy flows and circulates around the world, but in some places it stops and builds up. When this place becomes a dungeon, concentrated mana turns into a monster that shimmers and roams on land and underwater. Hidana shivered and felt a sudden flush of heat. A trip to that dungeon could lead to unpleasant outcomes. Nothing could stop Platty now that they had already arrived. Wiping sweat from his brow, the man was relieved his wife could handle it. Clearing the dungeon is a complex skill. She just needs to defeat the enemies, and that kept drawing the young man back in. Burdened by the event, he no longer felt he had to protect her. After all, they were now husband and wife. He asked her to wait for him. She turned in surprise because a minute earlier he had given no sign he would go with her. Proud and selfless, Kitten rushed to her and said the work was for her husband and they would go together. When they entered the dungeon, brick walls surrounded them instead of the usual stones outside. Torches burned everywhere, lighting their way. The boy noticed the place looked like the inside of a castle, and the girl shared his puzzlement. She stopped when she saw a suspicious puff of black smoke ahead. The mermaid stayed on guard and shouted at Keaton to leave immediately, and the puff turned out to be magical beasts and insects charging toward them. It looks like they've broken loose. A stunned man stands behind his wife, ready to face the demons. The boy is numb from the horror he has seen, and Platty shouts at her husband to leave as she searches her bag. 3 test tubes held unknown liquids. The girl ran up and threw the potions at the beast. Like a whirlwind, the creatures began to dissolve into tiny particles in the air, leaving only a shadow. Kitten stares in amazement. The monster that was rushing toward them has turned to dust, and Platty says there is more. There were only 3 test tubes. One froze their bodies, another electrocuted one of the demonic beasts, and the last held acid that dissolved every centimeter of flesh except the skeleton. Platty crosses her arms proudly and says mermaids can brew combat magic potions just as well, while her husband seems to have developed post-traumatic stress disorder from what he witnessed. After moving forward and taking out the last monsters, Keaton calls her the most dangerous creature, even though she just saved him. Thinking of his wife's courage, the boy knew he could not leave this task to her. With no tools on him, he was useless in battle. In the corner by the wall, a sparkling object caught his eye. It was a battle sword. Kedon grabbed the 2-handed sword, thrilled that his master's skill would boost its damage. But as the girl cheerfully tossed his potions around, he began to doubt he would ever use his weapon. Calling to his wife, he asked her to stop for a moment, realizing he had reached his limit, and said he had already won and would soon go home. Many agreed, and he turned to continue. Then he asked her how many monsters had been destroyed. The girl scans the dungeon anxiously. The place looks strange to her and something feels wrong. The young man listens to her words. The girl says the dungeon is fine, but the commander-in-chief monster is somewhere ahead and may be deep inside. She turned to face Gidan and changed commander-in-chief monster to boss so it would be easier to explain to her husband, who didn't understand anything. Her point is that there is a boss in the dungeon. Such caves are very rare, and it is extremely dangerous. Step by step, the girl explains to Keaton that only 2 types of bosses can be main dungeons. One type is a dragon. At the cave entrance, they were again struck by a fierce blizzard of magical energy that pushed the man back a little, while Platty held her ground and did not retreat, having recognized who was sending the enormous power. He is in the dungeon as something sinister approaches them. The young people stand waiting for the boss to appear. Kidding thinks it's a dragon and asks Platty about it. His wife perks up and says it's far worse than a dragon. Before them stands the boss, the king of the undead, a ruler without life. The undead figure looms over them like the moon in the sky. His eyes show no sign that anyone will leave here unharmed. Shaking with fear, Cadhan asks the girl what the creature before them is, and she, preparing for battle, tells him it is a great magician or a high priest. The immortal king rules at the highest rank among the undead, and has had powerful magic and great intelligence since birth. Facing a powerful undead king in a dungeon can only mean one thing: certain, painful death. The young man doesn't want his life, just beginning, to end so soon. Kitten won't retreat. Breathing in and sending out a stream of energy, the king of the undead says he feels a strange flow and will turn the boy into a living corpse and become his friend. The girl hurled her potion test tubes at the demon, expecting some effect. After they hit, the king's skull, the bone melted and then reformed with the crown, showing her potions were ineffective. Kitten noticed the monster was healing itself. Kitten was not surprised. She had expected it. The demon was immortal. Facing a dangerous enemy, Platty shouts that she has plenty of potions available and tells him to run away quickly. When the words were spoken, the young man weighed his odds of surviving if he ran away. That would let him live the life he had planned. The boy said he could not do it. He had one thing he picked up on the way to the boss. Seeing that his potions could not harm the undead king, he charged forward with his sword. Kaiden declared he was her husband and would save the girl. Leaping toward the magical entity, he risked being turned into a corpse in an instant. The girl was moved by the young man's words. As if he had gently touched her proud heart, he rushes at him like a hawk at its prey. The young man is ready to deliver a critical blow, but the king asks him to stop. Dropping to the floor, he said he was giving up, and Kitten and Platty stood there completely bewildered. The king does not want to feel pain. It surprised him that the young man would open the holy sword, which contains enormous power. Stunned, the boy held his holy sword before his face. Platty stayed silent and did not join their conversation. The monster asked where the boy had gotten the sword. Suddenly, the death-like monster remembered the holy sword from his dungeon, and Kitten apologized as he moved to hand it back. The undead king declared the sword his. The holy sword is sentient and chooses its own bearer, and it has now chosen the young man as its new owner. Relieved that his treasure is lost, the undead king says his duty in this world is finally over. He asks if killing him with this sword is necessary, because the man is cursed with immortality, and with this sword the boy can cleanse the king, but he refuses and does not believe he is the right person to wield it. Kedon said he came from another world. At that time, God gave him the power to use any tool to its full potential. That may explain why he can use the holy sword. The monster knelt and cried out, saying this was the gift from the gods told of in legends, and that an exceptional ability cannot be limited to mere skills. Anyone who has received God's blessing deserves the title of hero. These people are holy. Bowing, the undead king faced the puzzled Kitten. The creature turns to those who deliver the gods' blessings and asks them to share some of their immunity. Stunned by what is happening, the man asks not to be given a higher rank. Plato expected her husband to be so cool. The undead king looked puzzled and asked why the young man had come here. Keaton said he had recently started living nearby. The girl interrupted and said destroying monsters is the resident's main duty. Monster fur and bones are baked into the materials of magical tools. Some of those materials even taste good. The girl said this with a blissful smile. Her husband was tired of her words because people welcomed them, and she found it convenient to have a dungeon nearby. Delighted, he asked to enter the dungeon and go berserk, and the king agreed since he had planned to defeat the monsters himself, with the young people helping him a great deal. Platty is relieved and grateful to the undead king for granting permission, sees nothing wrong with it, and they share a smile while a stunned boy stands behind them. The girl, realizing a friendship had formed between the king and them, introduced herself and Kitten. She wanted to meet the evil spirits. The king thought about it and realized he had forgotten his name. Platty was puzzled because she did not expect the king to forget his name. If he's not mistaken, he was an archbishop in the church before he was born. The mermaid listens intently to her new friend. For unknown reasons, he was abandoned and chased here by members of the church who had come to this place. In the dungeon, the entity absorbed the accumulated mana and cast a great spell that eventually killed him. He lived here for centuries. No longer possessed, he has forgotten his own name. The king is so upset he sheds a tear. The husband and wife feel deep sympathy for the lifeless king and are very sorry that this happened to him. The entity said he was just an old man who had lost even the simplest will to live and felt life had no meaning. After the children arrived, his boredom eased a little, and the king was clearly pleased. When Kitten started to smile, Plattyfish noticed and spoke to his new friend, inviting him to visit sometimes and saying they would be happy to greet him with the vegetables he had made, and the boy called the king sensei. She pricked up her ears and asked why her husband had given him that name, and because he had been a great clergyman in life, the boy decided to call him that. A single spoken word reached the lifeless king, who had lain in the dungeon for hundreds of years after dying from the spell. Still kneeling, he thanked them for their kindness. Now they had a good neighbor. As Kidon headed for the exit, he shouted to the sensei in panic that the sword would not leave him. The king laughed. The girl felt burdened and realized the sword truly loved him, so he received the holy sword. Keaton cried out happily that it was finished. The young man was thrilled with what he had made. Platty asked about her husband's new building, and he showed her the structure, saying it was a forge furnace. Drawing his holy sword, he admires its power as the blade slices through a boulder like butter. The girl hinted at the holy sword's true purpose. The mermaid grew curious about why he wanted to build a forge, and he then reminded her that he had received a gift from the lifeless king, Sensei. Plattyfish realized the man was talking about the manor medal the sensei had given the boy as thanks. Admiring him, the girl calls him a magnanimous sensei, and the dungeon's magic is so dense it can form mana metal and simply provide them with this rare resource. Platyfish is curious about what the boy will do next. Now that he has the valuable metal, he can finally make what he has wanted for so long. The boy is looking forward to it. As Keaton forges, the girl keeps admiring. The metal is pure mana, so it could become a fine magic sword. Reliable magic weapons cost at least 10 gold. A man displays his creation. They were a frying pan and a knife with the sharpest possible blade. Keaton bought kitchen utensils and is as happy as a child. The girl is dazed, lost in thoughts of a magic sword. Her curiosity about it has grown. The boy started speaking, pointing to each item and naming it, since showing was easier than explaining, and then he began to cook. Kaidian cuts the vegetables with this kitchen knife, then fries them in a newly forged magical frying pan. Like a Michelin star chef, he theatrically seasons the dish with salt and pepper. She waits eagerly to taste it. The boy cooked fried vegetables, a new dish for his menu. The generous portions gleamed and were full of sweet flavor. While eating the delicacies, she noticed their dishes had changed. Cadden made not only a frying pan and a knife, but also ordinary dishes. The mermaid came to her senses and can't understand why he's wasting that mana metal right now. The boy admires the miracle material because it heats quickly, does not burn, and is easy to clean. It's not a dream but a real fairy tale. This will expand the boy's cooking skills a little, and he looks happier than he ever was before moving to another world. Platyfish, stunned as if by an electric shock, asked which recipes he wanted to add. Enjoying his new cooking tool, he said there were some, but they would need a few more ingredients. The girl angrily demanded to know what else he needed for this. After her words, the young man thought he really wanted meat. Anticipating the dish's flavor, he says adding meat will make it taste completely different. Eager to try it, the girl invited him somewhere. They wander through the forest. As a mermaid, Platty has never seen the mountain monsters she always wanted to eat. Twisting the sword in his hands, the young man thought they would hunt in the traditional human way. The girl agrees there are also monster birds, a boar or deer, but she is not interested. Mountain monsters are best suited for cooking. Platty cheerfully says that people claim mountain monsters taste very good. Kedun concluded these creatures are used as bargaining chips in this world. She then asks her husband what he thinks about caves and how monsters might be born in them. The cave dungeon is sealed because the lifeless King Sensei controls the monsters with his powers and prevents them from coming out. If there were mountain monsters here, the whole mountain would be a dungeon. She wants to reach a clear conclusion so the young man understands everything and asks no questions. They stopped and the boy could not believe a dungeon like this stood nearby, leaving him upset that there were no normal animals here to eat. Entering the forest thicket, they see darkness ahead where light reflects from many eyes, probably animals. A whole pack of monstrous boars stands before them and is clearly not interested in peace or friendship. Platty was delighted by the find as Kedun began sweating in fear. The young man seemed like he would never get used to the new world. He is frightened because the boars clearly look ready to attack them, and the girl even recognizes them as square boars. Bloody jumps for joy and calls this place incredible. 2 dungeons stand nearby. Keaton is stunned and scared and can't see why anyone would be happy about this. The Grill starts fighting and pulls out her potions, asking her frightened husband to hold them back as long as possible and promising to put them down quickly. Boars attacked one by one the young man holding the holy sword, and although he was not ready to fight, he had no choice and had to accept it and do what was necessary. Wielding such a powerful sword, he took down the boars one by one without letting any of them touch him. A pile of carcasses lies behind him. Kitten, weapon held in front, pants from exhaustion. Platty jumps for joy, saying he did everything perfectly and she didn't even have to use any potions. The boy did not want to fight and said he won because they attacked one at a time and he unexpectedly won. At least they will be able to eat something other than vegetables. The mermaid is eager to start cooking. With so much meat, she suggested cutting it into pieces suitable for cooking, then freezing the pieces with a potion, and Kedun considered building a wheelbarrow and a refrigerator to store the food. In a short time, the boy built what he had planned, a refrigerator and a wheelbarrow full of provisions. Curious, the young man asked his wife about the freezing potions. She crossed her arms over her chest, clearly doubting that he trusted her. The girl kept a full supply. Keaton, sincere and with tears in his eyes, thinks Platty. Their daily life keeps getting better. For the girl, this is the most important thing. She perks up and says this will help the boy improve his dishes, asks him to cook faster, and he just laughs at his wife's reaction. Wild boar is still pork. If a young man wants to turn it into the tastiest dish, he will make tonkatsu. Brushing imagined drool aside, he thinks only of the crispy crust of tonkatsu, which outrages the girl because her husband seems to enjoy the thought. His dreams turned into thoughts because there would again be few ingredients. The problem comes when making bread. The obstacle is the eggs. Plenty is angry about this. He asked the girl if this world had eggs like those from another world. She said, upset, that she'd heard landlubbers here do something similar, but in the land of mermaids you won't see anything like that. Platty points to a crow that landed in their field. Kitten says that one won't be suitable for cooking. The girl suggests a radical plan to return to the mountains to search for the monster bird, but the young man refuses. As he realizes he must kill the monsters he's found, a huge creature flies in the sky behind him, growing closer with every second. Something pressed against the boy's back, confusing him, so he turned to see why while the girl stared at the creature and opened her mouth in surprise. Plattyfish assumed it was a bird or a plane, but Kidam saw it as a meteor hurtling toward them. When the creature swept in close and spun the air into a vortex around them, they knew who it was. The girl was less frightened than Kid, and the winged creature was a real dragon. He wants their souls because they invaded the dungeon he rules. She points to the mountain they're on, and Platty recognizes it as the dragon's dungeon. Cadence says nothing, standing frozen and frightened with his mouth open. Seeing the whirlwind from the dragon's powerful wings, the girl rightly concluded the dragon ruled the dungeon. Nearly sobbing with fear, the boy shouts to the mermaid, recalling her words that the dungeon has no ruler. She understood that he was drawn to the young man's strength. Grinsel Dragon Shroud keeps asking who invaded her royal mountain dungeon without permission and who killed her minions, though she knows the young man did it. Covering his face with his hands, he tries to wriggle out of it by saying they did not know the mountain had an owner. A powerful winged creature still looms over them. Keaton begs forgiveness and vows never to go there again. The dragon refuses to listen. Grinsel Dragon Trout considers the act unforgivable. Those lowly creatures crossed into her domain and did as they pleased. The humans dishonored her. That is why she will erase their existence. Grinsel sets out to purge the results of their sins, and in a surge of anger, breathes fire to turn them to ashes. Her fire spreads across the entire land like a blast wave, and Plattyfish and Chitin do not know what to do. Panicked, the girl believes they will die, but the boy clears his head and remembers his holy sword. Like a true hero, he swung his weapon. With his body, he shielded Platty from the fire and tried to fend off the dragon's blow. He cut through the flames closing in on them, and if he had slowed for another second, it would have been over. Grinsel Dragon, Shroud, is stunned by this turn of events. She sees humans as inferior, yet they manage to defend themselves. Gasping with exhaustion, the boy acted and saved them both from imminent death, while the girl tried to accept it, but then began to panic about what was happening. While airborne, Dragon Shroud cannot believe a mere human could repel her death breath. Kedun worried not for himself, but for his wife, who was pleased that her beloved had succeeded, as expected. He hadn't just reflected the breath of death. None of its fire remained. At that moment, the boy thanked the gods that the seedlings had survived, then turned toward the dragon with a serious look, making Grinsel's Dragon Shroud shudder. As a polite citizen from another world, he bowed and apologized for entering the dungeon without permission, but he had one small condition. With his sword extended and the blade aimed at the dragon, he says that if the ruler truly has a claim, he is ready to fight the ruler to protect what he holds dear. Standing with his holy sword pointed at the dragon, he offers the dungeon monster to fight the boy in a deadly duel, though he quietly hopes the creature will simply leave. Grinsel Dragon Shroud saw the sword in the selfless youth's hand and turned to him. The dragon wanted to say something about the sword in his hand. The man could only think to speak out. Keaton held his sword forward and said it was the holy sword Grinsel Dragon Shroud had in mind, the immortal king's sword that had been given to him, implying he was very powerful. The dragon lands and says this is the wrong answer, greatly tensing the young man and leaving him in a stupor. This holy sword belongs to Grinsel Dragon Veil. The monster reached for its treasure. The youth was terrified. Then the lifeless king spoke to Grinsel Dragon Veil. His words were true. Like the dragon Grinsel, the young man did not expect the master to appear suddenly, the master's back shielding Kitten. A powerful attack sent everyone flying back like the wind. Sensei knocked the other lord aside. With the winged creature lying lifeless on the ground, the master turned and said it had all happened because of him and apologized profusely. The young man did not fully understand what he meant. Then Platty stepped into the conversation to clarify the situation. The immortal king said he came first because he was looking for those who had infiltrated his mountain. The dragon called him a worthless corpse for daring to invade its territory. Then the sensei mentioned Kitten's new neighbor. Cursing his neighbor, the dragon flew off to find the impudent creature disturbing his territory. The lifeless king realized his mistake and, laughing awkwardly, finished telling the story of the misunderstanding. After that, the young man felt no better. He seemed guilty because they had broken into Dragon Mountain without permission. The young man thinks they are to blame. Sensei says nothing because he is human too and understands his friend. Dungeons are not a good source of raw materials like ingredients or building materials, but they are an important place for steady income and getting essential items. The Lifeless King explains that this is also why people band together to conquer dungeons. The Immortal King tells Grinzel Vale that invaders are routine for the dungeon master. The dragon just gulped. Pointing at his powerful winged neighbor, he calls it shameless to get angry over a small part of the dungeon being captured and to leave his territory to punish the invaders. Scolded Grinzel Vale broke out in sweat. For someone so powerful, his actions are narrow-minded and childish. After all this, he still thinks he deserves to be called the heir of the geyser dragon. The sensei meets the dragon's gaze, tells Kaiden he is no match, orders him to return to his mountain immediately, and the boy, watching from behind the master's back, hesitates and begins to stop on hearing those words. Grinzel Veiled refuses the Immortal King's demands. He cannot understand why a worthless man would have the sword. His father told him to take the sword from a dead man. The creature cannot see why a corpse would pass the sword to another mortal. The Lifeless King reminds them that the sword has its own will and chose this man on its own. Kiden is flattered by the sensei's words. During the dragon's father's life, he began to understand the immortal's power. The father feared her, unlike Grinzel Vale, who only knew how to burn everything mindlessly. It was natural to pay with this sword. Furious, the dragon will not accept that reason, and is ready to fight the mortal to the death to inherit the geyser dragon's treasure. Then the Lifeless King of the evil spirits challenged the creature to fight him, and the mighty beast hissed in reply. Turning around, he prepared to fly away, refusing to take part in the battle this time, shouting to the young man to remember this day, while Kiden, with nothing better to say, asked the astonished Grinzel Vale to wait a second. The desperate boy grabbed the powerful creature by the tail and knocked it flat on the ground, something the young man had not expected. Grinzel shouted at the boy, calling him worthless for daring to touch him. The frightened boy backed away quickly and apologized. Sensei reminds them the dragon cannot defeat them. Kiden faced the dragon. The boy invited him to join them for dinner if he wasn't in a hurry. Grinzel Dragon and Shroud did not quite understand the boy. The guys present a prepared dish made from a dungeon dragon boar. Kiden doubts the powerful creature will like the steak, but offers to try it. After a moment's thought and a quick look at the small piece of meat, Grinzel tossed it into her wide mouth. Satisfied, the dragon rose to its full height and said it was delicious. The powerful beast unleashed an explosion into the sky that spread as a blast wave across the area. A strong gust from the dragon blew the youth back as it leaned over and said it tasted excellent. Kiden was clearly pleased the dungeon lord liked the steak so much. Grinzel asks for even more meat, and Plattyfish, out of jealousy, begs for a piece of steak. The boy is excited because he doesn't know how much more needs to be cooked for everyone. A blinding light flared behind the children, and when they turned, Grinzel was glowing like a light bulb, leaving Kedon and Platty stunned. Before them, the dragon glows and slowly shrinks. The young people stare at the astonishing sight. The silhouette of the huge, powerful creature grows smaller with each passing second. Meet Grinzel Dragon, Shroud, a petite girl in a dress with a fluffy skirt, her hair in 2 pigtails tied with bows, appearing in all her grace. The newlyweds, still stunned, realized the dragon had become a little girl. Kiden hadn't expected the creature to be female. Sensei explains that dragons can take human form. Grinzel, drooling in anticipation of the delicious food, shouts to the boy that she loved the steak he made and admits she will always love him. The girl stood at the table and demanded they bring her meat right away. Outraged, Platty resented the dragon's behavior because Platty was next in line and should be the one standing and waiting. Kiden decided to fry more meat so there would be enough. The Lifeless King tasted the cooked dishes and was not disappointed. The steak delighted him. The boy is happy about it. According to the sensei, the meat was fried perfectly. What impressed him most was the seasoning. Keaton said he used garlic for flavor and added salt and pepper. To him, it's the simplest dish. The Immortal King refuses to believe this, insisting even the royal palace cannot make a dish this delicious. Grynessel, the dragon Shroud, lies helpless on the ground after eating too many steaks and tells Keaton not to think too highly of himself, while a nearby mermaid with an equally huge belly relaxes. The girl speaks sternly, telling him not to get carried away, but she still hopes for the holy sword, and he reminds her she is inexperienced and that it is impossible for now, so the boy apologizes, saying the weapon itself will not let him go. She steeled herself and vowed to quietly burn the man to ashes with her deadly breath, then easily take the sword for herself. When Platty sits down beside her, It reminds her that if she does this, she will no longer be able to eat the best steaks of her life. Greensel realized what stood in the way of her plan. A strong whirlwind enveloped her, and as she turned into a dragon, she shouts to Kitten to remember that one day she will take this sword from his hands, and until that moment she will come to taste his food. The boy agreed and said goodbye, saying he would be glad at any time. Grinzel Dragon. Shroud began to fly away. Platty asked her to wait a few seconds because she wanted to ask something. Worried about her husband, she asks if any monster birds are in her dungeon, and after thinking, Grinzel says she does not know how many there are, but that the birds are bony and not good to eat. The mermaid doesn't need their meat, she only wants their eggs. Dragon, Shroud still doesn't understand why they need the birds' eggs. Then Platty says excitedly that if they have eggs, Keaton can make the meat even more delicious than it is today. Grinzel is struck by lightning. She immediately turned around and flew home. The mermaid again asks the powerful beast who creates the wind with his wings to stop. Platty's ears perk up as she proudly says she knows about the ecology of monsters and asks to go with him. Kitten hadn't expected his wife to want to fly with the ruler. Grinzel Dragon, Shroud agreed without hesitation. The next second she flew off with Platty on her back, slowly pulling away from the land where the boy and the lifeless king remained. Kid Anne stood stunned, silently watching the girls fly away, while Platty shouted that she would not return home empty-handed. The lifeless king calls the events a rather nice picture. The boy agreed without hesitation. Looking at the open sky, he smiles and says it's better to be like this than to sit around bored. Kedon shows his creation to his wife. She stammers, unable to believe it. A boy echoes the girl's thought, saying he turned a man into a metal sword. Platty, eyes glowing, looks at the weapon and says this monometal sword will be the strongest in the world, except for the holy sword. She expected to get rich and thought the man would sell it for a high price. Her dream of wealth was shattered when Gideon decided not to sell it. He upgraded Kakashi into a moving scarecrow that stands in their field. The boy is overjoyed with what he did. The girl didn't really understand why it had to be Kakashi. The mermaid frowned, a cloud of bewilderment on her face. Kitten reassured her that they still had mana metal left. Her frown gave way to joy at the thought that the scarecrow with swords would cut up the annoying birds attacking their fields. The man didn't understand what she meant. The boy watched what their living dummy had done, while Kakashi used a mana sword slash and easily cut the bird into pieces. Keaton tells the scarecrow that killing is forbidden on his territory. The mermaid, realizing this is impossible, feels a little upset. Kun can't even reach the birds flying and screaming above him as if to tease him. The boy looked relieved and happy, and Plattyfish did not quite see the point of her husband giving swords to the scarecrow. Instantly darkening and delighted, the boy shouts that it's cool. His eyes shine with happiness. While Kitten considers what equipment to give Kakashi-kun, the girl says she really doesn't understand male romance. With a fishing rod in hand and a sword on his back, Kitten sits before the vast sea and enjoys the moment because it has been a long time since he last went fishing. He realized that on his last fishing trip he thought he had caught something huge, but it was a mermaid. He married her on the spot and immediately decided to live with Plattyfish. Summoned to another world from his life as a hired hand, he expected a quiet, leisurely life, but a mermaid who became his wife added color and drew him into an immortal king and a dragon, keeping him constantly busy. The boy went fishing to get a moment of peace away from the hustle and bustle, and this time is good for him. A sudden splash made the boy flinch. From below the sea horizon, a boy with fish fins on his head surfaced. Keaton was frightened by the sudden silhouette. He turned to the boy and asked if he might be Plattyfish's friend. The boy was very friendly with the mermaid man. The creature was not entirely happy with the stranger. The stranger emerged from waist-deep water facing only one threat, death. Kitten heard this, fell silent, and tensed. Raising his hand, Platty's possible friend called for everyone to get ready. Warriors and mermaids in uniform rose from the water, and the commander ordered everyone to kill the man on shore and anyone who resisted. At their commander's order, the mermaid warriors formed a wave and rushed toward their target, the stun kid. They slowly closed in and aimed their tritons at the boy, who stood frozen with his mouth open. Back in reality, Kedon gripped his holy sword by the hilt in time and swung it. The boy made a single movement of his hand and created a tornado that spun the warriors as they tried to attack him. Realizing what he'd done, Keaton froze, unsure what to do next while the exhausted warriors' bodies gurgled in the sea. Agitated, the Platty ran toward the noise. Being far from her husband, she grew alarmed by the commotion. The boy tried to explain what was happening, but he was interrupted. From the water, a possible friend of Plate's appeared and called her name. He had also been caught in the Holy Sword's tornado. The girl was surprised to see someone familiar. The young mermaid was not a friend at all, but the brother of the mermaid's wife. Only a few meters separate them in a deathly silence, and Kidden does not understand what is happening because Platty never told him she has a brother. The mermaid warriors suddenly rushed toward the girl, calling her princess, and Kidden grew even more stunned by the situation. Upset, the girl watched the sea where the mermaids splashed and called to Princess Highness to ask if she was safe. Platty decided to introduce herself properly. The man who tried to kill her husband is the girl's older brother, Prince Arowana, the next heir to the throne. Surprised, the boy found not only a princess, but the prince himself standing before him, and he gaped. Platty crosses her arms, proudly reminds him she said she was a princess, then turns to her older brother and introduces the boy while the prince looks confused. The princess shouts that the boy is her husband, Kidden, and she is not afraid, but he is terrified and tries to stop his wife from speaking. All the mermaids in the army, including the prince, heard the words and froze, their mouths opening in shock. Platty stands her ground, saying she understands her older brother came here to bring her back, but refuses to return to the mermaid kingdom and asks that her words be told to her parents. Outraged, the prince finds it unforgivable that the landwiller kidnapped and defiled his sister, and he orders his army to resume the battle. Platty's older brother calls her husband a scoundrel and plans to wipe him off the face of the earth and get his little sister back. The princess urges her beloved not to worry and not to feel embarrassed about counterattacking, but the boy holding the holy sword hesitates because those people are not strangers to her. A strong gust from behind Platty and Kidden blows the fish into the sea, and their second attempt fails. The strongest wind blew from Vale the dragon as it flew into the sea's roar. The prince was shocked that the dungeon master had come in person. An entire army of warrior mermaids fears this powerful creature. They fear the dragon will devour them. The mermaids fear the dragon could destroy them with a single breath. Grinzel Dragon, shrouded, landed beside the humans and asked if they were okay. Kidden thanked him for his help. The prince was stunned that earthly creatures had befriended a dragon. The beast laughed and said he could not eat the delicious meat if the boy disappeared. Plenty told him not to be proud of it just because he was thanked. Her older brother wanted to speak to the three creatures, but the dragon saw he was left completely alone. Turning, the prince saw the sea empty behind him. As a reward for not running away from the dragon Grinzel, the geyser dragon's daughter promises to turn him into coal instantly. Kidden struck the mighty beast on the knee so it would not dare do that. It howled from the blow. The boy says the man in the sea is Pletty's brother. This surprises fail. Keaton invites the prince to dinner. The girl's older brother does not understand the boy's behavior. Holding out his hand, the boy offers to talk calmly, explain the situation, and get to know each other. The prince did not appreciate his generosity, believing he was plotting something, so he refused to listen to a single word. Platty cut into the conversation and told her brother to hurry back to his kingdom as soon as possible. The husband tells his wife she's wrong and says her brother came all this way because he's worried about her. He thinks he should listen to everything the prince wants to say. The girl did not expect that reaction from the young man. The elder brother heard this and said he had changed his mind. A bright light from the prince blinded Kidden. As a prince, he cannot run from the fight because his honor is at stake, so he accepted the challenge. The boy is stunned that his brother came out of the sea naked and completely unashamed. Kidden shouts at him to cover up. The brother finds Kidden rude, but the girl had anticipated everything and prepared clothes, handing him some underwear. The boy realized his wife had already been through a similar situation. He invited his brother to join them. Worried, Vale tells Plattyfish that Kidden plans to feed him. It's a chance to try a new dish. Plattyfish stays silent, unsure what's happening. The older brother saw the newlyweds' house and called it pathetic, even though their sister is part of the mermaid royal family, and Kidden lets her live in a rundown house, which angers Plattyfish and embarrasses the boy. The prince, standing in his underwear, shouted at the boy, accusing him of slavery and of using his sister. Then Platty drew his attention to another building. This barn stores the meat from the mountains and the vegetables from the fields. The older brother is stunned by its shape, size, and mysterious walls. Kidden explained that the walls are plaster he found in the mountains. The sister called her brother. She points to another building. It's the brewery where they do the fermentation. Kidden says dreamily they're waiting for the miso and soy sauce when it's done. The older brother doesn't understand the foreign words the boy is saying. Plattyfish says her husband knows things the others do not. Her husband cooks well and is strong in combat. Kidden can do anything. The warehouse the girl showed before is her magic room. As her husband, Kidden always takes good care of her. While Platty brags about her husband, the boy invites the prince to sit on a chair. A young man cooked a new dish and recently made a garden table. He invites people to the table for tea and conversation, but a girl was already there. Confused, the older brother didn't know where the child came from, but Kitten explained she was Grinzel Vale in human form. The girl hurried him to bring a new dish. Stunned, the prince sees a dragon sitting in front of him. Plattyfish, offended, says she is always like this when she asks for food. Kitten introduces a new dish called zenzai, growing soybeans for the ingredient also produced adzuki beans. Everyone picked up their utensils and began tasting the dish, and the brother was careful because the food was unfamiliar to him. They all tried the traditional dessert soup together and agreed it was very tasty. The brother and sister savored it, and Vale asked for more, but there was none left. The beans sprouted by accident. There were only a few. Everyone is angry that there are no tasty ones left. Turning to the prince, the girls blamed him for arriving at the wrong time and for there being no soup left. The elder brother fell to his knees and apologized to the boy. Kitten's skills are unmatched, as if he were a saint or a sage. The young man asks him to stop, but the prince is truly convinced that his sister is in love with him. He said he was entrusting his sister to her care. Platty was happy, but Kitten wasn't sure it was okay. He does not understand why he is against it. When the young man first heard the mermaid was a princess of the mermaid kingdom, he realized that with her high status she could not choose a husband for herself so easily. He realized many people expected things of her, but she shouted that it wasn't true, saying she was married only to him, didn't care about others' expectations, had decided to live her own way, and called him a fool. The brother tries to calm his sister by saying that Mr. Sint does not know his wife's situation. Although the prince wanted to tell the truth, Vale said there was a dispute over who ruled the surface between humans and demonic creatures. The neutral mermaids were drawn in, and a political marriage was forced. The brother is shocked that the girl knows she has reminded him of who she is for several hundred years. It reaches her ears whether she wants it or not. A war rages between humans and magical creatures, and Kitten is summoned to the world as a hero to fight them. My brother says there will now be more interference from both sides, and rulers will be forced to choose. By not choosing a side, the mermaids risk becoming enemies of both sides and targets of their attacks. Rumor says the kingdom's leaders are deciding which race Plattyfish should marry. This matters to Kedon. After meeting her here in peace, the older brother, convinced that Platty can save the kingdom only by fleeing, wants to fulfill his sister's wish. The prince turns to the girl and says he is glad she has met a good man, and the girl is clearly happy. Kneeling, the brother asks to protect his sister and to marry her officially, and Keaton tells him to stop while remaining willing to formalize the marriage. Vale interrupted the young men's conversation and asked about marriage. Embarrassed, the man said yes. Grinsel Dragon Shroud will also marry. Kedon is stunned by this, and Platty looks at her rival with jealousy. Vale thought about how to get the holy sword and discovered that marriage would divide the property. To Dragon, a human life passes in the blink of an eye, and as his wife she'll enjoy exquisite meals every day. She asked him to marry her. Kedian refused. The girl was shocked, though the man already had plenty. As for the Vale, it knows nothing. When a male is strong, it is common for him to have several females. She called the man the master. Kitten said he was not her master, and even if he was strong, he opposed polygamy. Dragon Shroud burst into tears at his answer. She can't understand why this is happening, and she thinks it's because she's weaker than the immortal king or that the man hates her. Sobbing, she demanded that the boy marry her, and Keaton agreed if she would stop crying. Vale screamed with joy. Plattyfish was shocked, and the young man apologized to his brother. The prince said that fathers who have daughters everywhere share a common trait. On the surface, the women seem very annoying. Platty is upset and irritated by her brother's behavior and by the newcomer. The newlyweds walk along the shore. The brother has gone home to tell his parents. They are waiting for their parents' approval to marry. The girl worries about Keaton because she senses something is wrong. When life at court became unbearable, she ran away from home and met him. After being caught, she was forced to become his bride. Life is fun here. Her darling's cooking is delicious. She wants to be with him forever, but she only bothers him, even though she cannot return to the mermaid kingdom. Keaton just smiled, knowing her circumstances, and has no intention of changing how they live now. Given strength from God, the boy came here after people called him useless in battle, and he does not call himself a strong man, but believes they can strive for their happy life. From that day on, embarrassed, he tells the girl to stay with him. Plattyfish meets his gaze with burning eyes. Overjoyed, she jumped into the arms of her soon-to-be official husband. They are happy together. Vale called out the boys who were hugging, saying he was making her wait, and the girl continued to call him master. She raged on the ground at their feet, saying she was hungry. Kitten and Platty exchanged a look. The boy decided to act. He will give her a wedding present. The mermaid is pleased, and the girl says any gift will do as long as he does it quickly. After deciding to build a house, Kitan thought they needed more help. Platty held out a starfish, thinking that was what the boy wanted. The boy said that was not what he meant and explained he was thinking about the workers. Platty asked again. Keaton said they had to take care of the field now so he could sort the harvest and collect what was already ripe, adding that he was already busy making miso and soy sauce and had a wife. Keaton said he wanted to build a house. Plato was pleased, and the undead king called it exciting. The king's words frightened the heroes, who had not expected his presence and said he had arrived without warning. The boy then asked if something bad had happened, but the king reassured him that nothing was wrong, that he had simply been set free and had dropped in to visit them, and that he was fine. Kidden relaxed when the guest said he had another piece of mana metal and handed it to him. Amazed by its size, the boy said it would be very useful. The undead asked if he truly needed the stone. He nodded and said he could make many household items from it. Then he said it was just in time because he lacked workers, and the king asked what he meant by hands. Kidden said Platty's brother had noticed they were living in a terrible house, so the young man said he would now build a completely different house using all his strength. Plenty was surprised and suggested that in that case, they ask the undead king for help, and Kidda thought the undead king making miso would speed things up, but he dismissed the idea as stupid. The undead king asked how many workers were needed and whether he could bring them here. Stunned, Kedem thought he had misheard and asked again, but the undead king asked if 10 would be enough for him. Confused, the young man said he would be grateful, but he did not know where he would get so much, and the undead king disappeared, asking him to wait a moment. Kedon and Platty could hardly believe their eyes when the king of the undead appeared and brought out 5 orcs and 5 goblins from his dungeon. Explaining that the monsters were born in his dungeon and obeyed him, he ordered them to obey the saint so the young man could use them as needed, and Keaton was very surprised. After that, he greeted the monsters and introduced himself as shyly, but they stayed silent and motionless. Keaton did not understand their lack of reaction, and the undead king explained they could not speak. He said they had just enough intelligence to follow orders, but lacked self-awareness and any instinct for self-preservation. Keaton understood. The king said he did not need to give them a reward, and because they draw mana from the air, he did not need to feed them, and Platty was very happy with this news. She shouted eagerly that Kidden would solve all his problems with them, and when the man remained silent, Plattyfish asked if that was true. The young man agreed that she was right, bowed gratefully to the king, and thanked him sincerely. The undead said there was nothing wrong, wished him luck building the house, and then vanished. The man clenched his fist. The young man called out happily about the plan to team up and build a great house. The monsters stood motionless, and he felt he was speaking into empty air. Kidden began giving orders. Orcs carried logs, goblins sawed boards. Kidden taught them how to use the machines. When the foundation was finally done, Platty said the monsters were amazing, and Kedon admitted he wasn't sure at first, but the house was turning out much bigger. He noted that orcs have the physical strength for hard work, and goblins have skilled hands. The young man said goblins make mistakes with hard work, but if you teach them patiently, they learn little by little, improve, and even learn to cut grass and weave it. The man smiled and said that even though they were monsters watching them work, he couldn't help wanting to be kinder to them. Plenty smiled at her husband's words. She explained there was no need to feel too much sympathy for them because they were made from mana and could not be considered living beings. Kitten put his hand behind his head and agreed, saying everyone should still have the chance to live well. Plattyfish explained that magical creatures often use these to attack humans. They send large armies, expecting the monsters to die, and then replace them with a dungeon. Kenan was surprised, but he still thought monsters handled everything from food to waste processing. He sighed and resigned himself, realizing this was the world and nothing else. The goblin stumbled and fell, dropping the things he was carrying, and Keaton turned around. He ran over and asked if he was all right. Helping the goblin up, the young man kept asking if he was hurt. The goblin stayed silent. Ketan realized they weren't reacting, but he hesitated to speak to them. The goblin's reply pulled the boy out of his thoughts, and the goblin said he was fine before repeating it to Ketan, leaving the boy and Platty completely shocked. Then the man dropped to one knee and asked the goblin again if he was all right. The goblin said yes. Speaking to Kitten as his lord, he said he wanted to work more, and the goblin beside him agreed. Keaton froze when he saw the other one speaking too, and goblins and orcs poured in from every side, saying they wanted to work for them Allard. Platty didn't believe it, but admitted the monsters now seemed self-aware, and the boy insisted self-awareness couldn't just appear that easily. Looking at his hands, he realized it might be the power he wielded. The skill and sense of superiority felt overwhelming, so he decided it was too dangerous and that he must handle it carefully. Clenching his fist, the young man decided that with all his strength he could speak to them and ran up to the goblins, hugged them and thanked them sincerely. Many thought they would not be able to use them and would refuse them later. The goblins cheered and tossed the hero into the air. When the big house was finally finished, everyone was pleased, but Grinzel was amazed. She asked everyone what had happened there while she was gone. Platty called her a stupid dragon, ordered them to listen and laugh, and then, with a victorious smile, declared that this was her and her husband's love nest. Grinzel rushed inside, saying she needed to look around, and Platty tried to stop her, but the dragon in human form watched in amazement and said she had never seen such a building. Keaton looked in, asked her to take off her shoes and leave them in a special spot, and when Vale didn't understand, he explained that doing so would protect the tatami from damage. Thinking it over, the girl slipped off her shoes, rolled on the tatami and asked what kind of bed it was and why it felt so nice. Platty asked if she was going to stay. The young man said there was nothing wrong with it, since he had built such a large house for that reason. Platty grew wary and asked if humanoid monsters would live there too. Kedon said that was the plan. After he said this, they called it ridiculous, saying they could not possibly have anything so incredible. They added that their home had originally been a dungeon. Keaton thought this would cause trouble for the undead king. He said they needed to build a house with many rooms called an apartment building. When the goblins wanted to object, he added he planned to do more, like a bathroom or kitchen, and that help wouldn't hurt. He asked the monsters to help him with it, and the goblins, flattered, all agreed. Plattyfish was baffled by the invasion, since she had thought only she and Kidden would live in the love nest. One of the goblins ran up, and Kidden called him Gabukichi. Platty asked what kind of name that was, and the boy said Gabukichi was the goblin's best sewer. Gabukichi announced the boy's order was ready. Pleased, Kidden went into one of the rooms and called out happily that it was indeed a futon. Platty asked what a futon was, and Kedon explained it was a gift he had given his wife. He said he grew cotton next to the grass to make tatami because he wanted a futon in their new home, then suggested the Platty lie there. She did not understand, but decided to try it and lay down on him, asking if it was right. After lying there for a bit, she burst out that it was so comfortable she had no words. The guy was glad she liked it. Keaton sat down beside her and apologized that she still had to sleep on the bare floor. Plattyfish thanked him sincerely for it. She turned to Gabukichi and thanked him too. The goblin hadn't expected it and felt embarrassed. After that, the heroes vowed to work even harder from that day on to make their farm life wonderful. A large sailing ship was approaching the land, the wind whistling as it cut through the waves. The goblin filled a bucket with water on the shore, sighing heavily. A sailing ship appeared on the horizon, and he leaned closer, realizing he had never seen anything like it. Later in the house, Cadden handed Platty's brother a glass of water and asked if something had happened. Amazed, the man looked around and said the house was simply amazing, then added that God must have blessed the young man with special powers. Kidner agreed and laughed sheepishly. Facing each other, Keaton explained what today meant. Arwana agreed and said it was about the wedding between the young man and Platty. He added the news would spread soon and that he had already told his father. The boy asked what they had told him. Arawana said the father was confused at first. The man told him about the boy and his strength, and then the father agreed. Arawana explained that the boy does not belong to any race. Kidan understood and said he was glad, but noted that Platty was tense about the political marriage. When he asked about the people and magical creatures, Arawana said they were furious, which Kidan had expected. Brother Platty said their father had declared his daughter would marry a great saint. He was astonished by those words and asked if they had resigned themselves. He said they were angry about losing the chance to marry Platty, but since enemies were also after her, it was better to leave things as they were. Kidan said he understood and was relieved that things were settled for now, but then Arawana dropped his forehead to the floor and fell to his knees. Caden looked surprised and asked what had happened. Arawana replied that they would do everything to keep the boy out of trouble, and in return asked them to look after Plattyfish. Kaiden calmly asked Arwana to stop and get up. Kaiden said he was glad to be with Platty and grateful for it. He told me then that he had come here by himself, and that if it were not for Platty, he would probably still be living alone, and like the king of the undead, he might even have forgot his name. Arwano froze at the mention of the undead king, and Kaiden clarified he meant a neighboring immortal ruler called the undead king, leaving him stunned as a frightened goblin hurried up to them. He announced bad news that the enemy was attacking from the coast. Many magical monsters had landed, and the goblin said orcs and other goblins were now fighting them, leaving Kadane and Arwana shocked. Keaton asked whether magical creatures had come here. Arwana replied it was impossible because this place was a top-level secret. The news shocked Keaton as well. They spotted a ship in the distance. Brother Platty said it was clearly a ship of magical creatures. Kidding asked the orc ahead if Orcubo, who was at the scene, was okay. An orc stepped aside, revealing to Kenan a demonic woman kneeling, and Orcabo said she was called Asterisk the Milky, though he wasn't sure. Kidden looked at the girl, and she indignantly told him to stop staring and mind his own business, then introduced herself as Astras the Heartless, a demon lord and one of the 4 heavenly kings. The orcs told the boy she had come to kill their lord and captured her. Keaton was surprised, looked at the pile of bones nearby, and asked what they were. The goblin said they were skeleton warriors led by magical creatures. He said there had been about 100 of them, but they were all destroyed. Keaton was shocked that 100 against 10 had lost. The young man stepped up to the monsters and said he knew how strong they were, but asked them not to take any more risks because he would be sad if they died. The monsters replied they would die for him. Keaton was indignant because he had just said that it was impossible. Asteris seethed at being ignored. Arowana stepped forward and asked how she knew about this place. The demon lord was stunned to see the prince of the mermaid kingdom. She told him they had become stupid because of their easy lives and must not underestimate the demon's intelligence. And cutting the rope with her nails, she said that even after an eternity they still would not understand, so she could free herself. Astri rose to her full height and drew her sword, declaring she would seize Princess Platty and kill the great saint who stole her. Then she aimed the blade at Kedon and said she meant him, and everyone around grew wary. Arowana said it is a demon lord who rules the top ranks of demons and thirsts for blood. On the battlefield, the monster makes even its allies tremble. A man rushed forward saying he would figure it out, but Keaton told him to stop. The undead king said the same. Keaton turned and smiled, Arowana tensed, and the undead asked why it was so noisy. Seeing the king, the man turned and cried out, and Keaton smiled as he introduced them to each other. Astras and Arowana recoiled in fear, calling him the world's scourge, and astonished that the boy knew him. The lifeless king said he had heard the demon would kill Kedon. The boy confirmed it, and Astras tensed, unsure what was happening, then heard a sound in the air and raised her head. She saw a huge dragon in the sky that asked them what was happening. Kedon approached Gristle and greeted her, and Astras was shocked by Kedon's appearance. Platty got off the dragon and ran to the hero. She asked if he was okay, and the boy said yes. Arowana asked where she had been, and Gristle said they had been looking for tonkatsu eggs in the mountains. The strays fell to the ground, and the dragon said that afterward they accidentally saw a demon ship in the ocean, grew curious and returned, then asked if that lesser demon planned to kill Kadhin. She said harming her master would make her an enemy, and added that she thought demons were worms, so their race would be destroyed, and Keaton, startled, stopped Vale and the dragon and apologized. Then the boy approached the demon on the ground. He offered a deal. They would let her go home if she promised not to be their enemy. Everyone stood with the hero. Estra interrupted him and told him not to dare insult her, because she was one of the 4 heavenly kings. Her whole body shook with fear, but she forced herself to regain control, because losing composure would disgrace the demon lord's power. Clenching her hand, she rose to her feet and announced a counteroffer, pointing her sword at Kidden and demanding a one-on-one fight, promising to listen if he won. Outraged by the demon's impudence, Grinzel threatened to roast her, but Kidden stopped her and declared he would not let anyone keep him from living in this world, and Platty blushed and was flattered. Raising his sword, the boy said he accepted the demon lord's challenge. The woman, seeing how reckless he was, also took a fighting stance. Seeing him, she decided that even with powerful allies, he was still a simple man she could grab. She looked closer at the sword, recognized it as the legendary dark sword Dr. Schwartz, and it fell from her hands as she lost consciousness. People were shocked, and Kedon asked why she had fainted. Grinsel suggested burying her so she would become fertilizer for their fields. Kedon stopped the dragon. After a while, Grinsel flew at a great height, holding the trembling Astra in her paw. Keaton asked her to return home, which she was unhappy about, and the sailors were so shocked to see the veil that they abandoned Astras and retreated. The girl regained her senses and faced the dragon, asking her why she served the man. Grinsel sighed contemptuously, and with an ominous look, replied that she was not obliged to explain anything to her. She smiled, thinking no one should know how exquisite the master's dishes were. Astros kept flying in her paw, wondering who the man was who had subdued 2 disasters. After some time had passed since the recent events, Keaton, Platty, and Gristle watched in surprise. Astras the Heartless stood before them with 2 demons. The boy asked why they were there. The goblin who brought them said they wanted to talk to him. Platty rushed at Astras, screaming for her to leave, and Kedon asked her to calm down and find out what had happened. The 2 demon girls beside her politely asked to be heard, and explained they had been kicked out of the Demon King's army. Surprised, the heroes asked for her side, and she said it was not true, added that she alone had been kicked out of the army, and told the demons to go back. They demanded to know how she could say that, since they had sworn to serve her for the rest of their lives. Grinsel, in human form, was not pleased to see this. Turning into a dragon, she told them to be quiet and warned she would burn them to ashes. Keaton stopped her by threatening to leave her without dinner. The dragon turned away, and the stunned demons hid behind Astras. The boy asked why Astras had been excluded from the Demon King's army. Lowering her head, she said she had failed the mission to capture the princess. Her squad of monsters had been defeated, and that was not all. She warned that letting a dragon wreak havoc on the battlefield was a serious offense, and Kaiden asked what kind of dragon had been on the battlefield between humans and demons. He looked at Vale, who folded her hands behind her head, and said she had been asked to take her back. Astras concluded this explained why she was stripped of the Sky King title and banished from the country. The demon girl beside her said the war meeting felt strange because the decision had been rushed while the demon lord was away, as if they were doing everything to get rid of her. Another girl said Mr. Reverian is behind this because he is always up to something, so it's his doing. Strez stopped them, saying there was no point in blaming anyone, because in the demon army strength was everything, and the mission's failure was her fault alone because she was helpless. Keaton realized that her exile was caused by the recent unrest. The demons were crying because Astras had committed herself to the army. Vale asked angrily what she wanted to talk about, and Platty cautiously said it was about taking responsibility for what she had done, while Astras said no, that she needed to start a new life and had something she wanted to know. At that point, she said the local orcs and goblins were stronger than her and had self-awareness and could speak, which was normally impossible, and that Kitten was worshipped by two world plagues, the dragon and the king of the undead. Clenching her fist, she said she wanted to know why, and needing an answer, she knelt and asked to be allowed to work for the boy. Vale and Plattyfish were stunned, and the man calmly said yes. The girls angrily said they were against it, and he shyly admitted he didn't even know if working here would help her in any way. He said that since she had chosen to leave her old life, move to new lands and start over, he offered to help. Vale laughed cruelly and said they would try to kill him again later. Kitten looked at her confidently and said he would have to accept the challenge then. The girl thought everyone would benefit from this. Beside Astras, the demons asked to stay, and Kitten said he would be glad, immediately warning that no blood could be shed while they remained, which was his condition. Volley frowned at the owner's naivety, and Platty sighed that it was very similar to Kitten. Astras bowed her head, agreed, and added that while here she would obey and take any job. So she asked for an order. Kitten was delighted and said he would like to ask for something in return. Nearby demon girls introduced themselves as Badami and Baelna. After a while, the demons worked in the fields with hoes, unsure why they had been sent there. Kidding hesitated about whether they could handle it, so he thought about giving them some chores around the house. Astros insisted she could handle it because it wasn't more complicated than a weapon, but Emmy objected. Noticing Estrus kept digging the same spot, the group heard Tommy explain it was a hoe used to loosen the soil and make beds. Estrus realized her mistake, and Kidding, surprised Tommy knew this, learned that Tommy had experience. Because Astros and Belena are aristocrats, their skin never developed calluses, so she asked that everything be given to her. Astor objected, saying she had chosen to serve the great saint no matter what and could handle it. Keaton was glad the demons were so diligent. After that, the man said Badami would go with the goblins to make the beds, and they said they understood. He then told Astros and Baleen to plant seeds in those beds every 30 centimeters, and the girls said they understood too. After a while, they went back to work. Astras and Baelna sat down and covered the plants while Baitme loosened the soil. Esther winced when a sharp pain hit her lower back, leaving her unable to stand up straight. The job was harder than she expected, and Baelna screamed. Astros asked what had happened, and the girl said something in the ground was wriggling. Astor's lower back snapped and they screamed, sometimes from pain, sometimes from disgust at the ground, and Kaiden watched, thinking it was too much for them. After a while, Astros walked beside the orcs and goblins, chuckling as she said that since the hunt was further on she could show herself. She asked Platty what they were hunting, and said a square boar because Kedon wanted to restock his meat supply. Asteris asked to be assigned this job so she could make up for the field work. They heard footsteps, looked ahead, and the sound came from the deepest part of the forest, so everyone froze. A flock of square boars ran in front of them. Astros shouted to Baelna and Baitme to get ready. Something shot past Astro's head as orcs and goblins cut down the boars with quick axe swings. The whole flock fell in an instant, and the humanoid monsters stayed silent, already resigned to it as routine. Taken aback by their strength, Astras listened as Belina told them to check their tools. The axes and sickles were made of mana metal. Platty sighed and said their tools and weapons were made entirely of mana metal, noting how extravagant it was. The demons couldn't believe it and said metal of such purity was rare. After that, Baitme said it was now clear to her why they were so strong. Astras said it was not so. She explained these men were already strong when they first met and had no weapons then. Balina and Baitme couldn't believe it. Platty said that if Astras was interested, her hoe was made of mana metal too. Astras shuddered, thinking the problem wasn't the weapon, but that they didn't know how to use it. She then screamed and said that they could no longer just stand there, and that we were going to hunt too. When the dust settled, the pack of boars lay dead. Platty thanked everyone for their work. Astras, breathing hard after taking several hits, said they had not even started. The orcs and goblins stood as if nothing had happened. Given the boar's strength and the hunt in the mountains, it was harder than the girl expected. Platty licked her lips, rolled up her sleeve, and said it was time to butcher them. Then she went to the dead bodies and began processing them, saying she could not carry them as they were, so she would cut them up and freeze them. Later at home, Cadden was cooking soup in a saucepan in the kitchen, tasting it as he went. I heard Platty say they were back. The man turned around happily and said they had arrived just in time. He looked out from the kitchen and said dinner was ready, but when he saw the dark demons he asked what had happened. Platty said the whole day had not gone as they had expected. Estrez lowered her head and said she had been one of the 4 heavenly kings, feared by humans and mermaids, and had come here after losing that title. The locals were incredibly strong and their weapons unmatched. She realized she was helpless. Kitten replied confidently that she was not. The woman looked surprised. The young man said it was not about her strength or influence, but about those who had sworn to stand with her, looking at Badimim and Baelna. They added that this means she has a power called charisma, so she should believe in herself more and will open new paths. Inspired, the girls looked at each other, clenched their fists eagerly, and smiled. Kitten announced it was time to eat. Vale was pleased. One of them suggested eating outside since the weather was so nice. They set the dishes on the table in the yard, which looked very appetizing, and sat around it. Aster asked what it was because she had never seen dishes like that. Vale asked too. Keaton explained it was grilled boar with ginger and tangerine soup. Skeptical, the girls took the plates hesitantly. Astris tasted hers, cried because it was so delicious, and startled Kedon. Platty and Vale ate quickly, clearly delighted. Kaiden was happy to see that and told him to eat as much as they wanted, enjoy themselves, and try again tomorrow. Earlier, Astras was carrying a basket of food and said she had not seen Kedon or Platty anywhere, and Baelna said they had business at sea. Asteris nodded, said she'd finished picking vegetables, and asked what else needed doing. Belina replied she needed to weed and clean the house. Vale ordered Asteris to plow and work, then lay on the porch of the house, and warned that anyone who does not plow will die of hunger. Temi asked about herself. Vale grew angry and demanded to know what the lesser demon was muttering. She sighed and said she would look after the house, and Tammy and Belina, though very unhappy, did not object and said they would guard the house until Keaton came. On the coast, Platty was in the water when her legs turned back into a tail, and she told Cadden, who sat beside her, that sometimes she had to return to that form. He asked if life in the sea was easier for her than life on land, and she looked at him. She answered confidently that it was the same everywhere, because her method of transforming into a human was of the highest quality. Living on land suited her. Kaido smiled. He knew it wasn't true but appreciated his wife's tact. He then asked what she wanted to talk about. She said sea monsters come ashore in this area. She said there are dungeons and caves in the mountains and the ocean, and monsters come out of them too, and Keaton asked if fish fertilizer, herring, and starfish are also monsters. Platyfish nodded and said some were useful, others weren't. He added that another of the ocean's 5 strongest monsters had appeared. Kidden's face darkened. Platyfish said the opponent would be easy, and he refused to let her go alone because he did not know how to breathe underwater. She smiled, said she was prepared, then pulled out the plexus and said it allowed breathing underwater. She handed it to the boy and told him to put it in his mouth and chew so he could breathe while doing it, and when he began to chew, Platyfish warned him not to swallow, because it was not ready, and he would not be able to breathe if he did not chew. Keaton swallowed and said he understood. The girl froze, asked why he had swallowed it, then handed him another and motioned for him to swim after her. The man dived underwater and managed to breathe, surprising himself. Platty stood in front of him, waving happily and calling him to follow, and she was very beautiful. Keaton watched her on land so often he began to forget she was a mermaid and swam after her, glad that such a beautiful princess was his wife. Kitten blushed, and the girl, seeing this, asked about his breathing and whether he was chewing. Kitten waved his hands and said that everything was fine. Feeling something, Plaid turned around and said the salt minerals and other elements gave off a strong flow of malice. Keaton turned to the same spot, wondering what was there, and a huge fish with glowing eyes appeared in front of the heroes. Platty shouted that she was the spotted moray eel. The fish let out a loud sound and swam straight toward the heroes, frightening Kedin. Shouting that she wouldn't let her move and that the guy should sort it out, the girl then threw the potion flasks. They hit a spotted moray eel, which caught fire and screamed. The man was shocked by the fire underwater and noticed his wife looking amazed. Drawing his sword, he looked at it and swung with all his strength. The spotted moray eel split in two before them. Plattyfish proved her husband was the strongest, and the man was surprised by his strength. The fish's body sank to the bottom. Kaiden noticed and began waving his hands. Platty said that since the problem was solved, they could go home. He drew everyone's attention, signaled there was more, and then dove to the bottom. He began cutting the seaweed at the base with his sword. Plenty didn't understand and said the seaweed was useless even for magic. Their rapid growth was a problem. She asked what he planned to do with them, and he smiled. They rose to the surface, and after a while on land, he started cutting them, humming about the taste. They were cooking over rocks in a pot. Kitten said the seaweed was like wakame and wanted to cook it with the moray eel. Platy asked if he really wanted to make a dish of moray eel and seaweed. Keenan said he would try it, picked up the plate, and said only a sprinkle of salt and pepper was needed before it was ready. Wakame and moray eel soup from another world. Plattyfish eyed the plate skeptically, tried a bite, and immediately beamed with pleasure at the taste. She could not believe a supposedly useless ingredient tasted so delicious and crunchy. Kitten said he was glad she liked it. Even if it seemed useless, it was good that it proved useful. He said it would take a lot of salt to get all the slime out, so he decided to leave the moray eel there and go home. Plattyfish said she would help. She said the flavor would surprise everyone, and her respect for her husband's sword. They finished the dish. Embarrassed, the man asked again, and Platty told him not to doubt it, while Kitten said it was not just his merit because many people helped him. Surprised, Platty heard the young man remind her they had begun living here together, and with the neighbors and new residents, it had become too lively. Over time, he came to see how important support was. Platty felt flattered by the speech, but the man added that he had realized something else. They needed to spend more time together. She was surprised, and Kitten explained they were newlyweds. Platty blushed, and the hero invited her to come back here to swim again, just the two of them. She agreed. She said she needed to create a way for him to breathe underwater so he could speak. He nodded. At Demon Castle, the man concluded that Astras the Heartless, one of the four kings, had been expelled from the army and banished. In front of him, they began discussing the meeting to choose the next king. A man interrupted and asked who would allow them to banish Astras. One of the men replied that, as already said, she had made a grave mistake. The man with the gloomy face called the speaker Reverian the Poor and told him not to pretend to be poor because it was his own doing. The man stood, drew his sword from its sheath, and held it to Raverian's neck, calling it treachery. Shaking with fear, Arveri begged the man with the sword for mercy, calling him the demon lord Zadin. Zidane told Raverian to deal with the mess before he returned, at least enough that he could take responsibility. Raverian bowed his head, and a nearby man turned to him, holding out a note and saying these were the coordinates. Zedin replied that he understood, then thought of Kitten and noted that even a demon lord could act when enraged. Sometime earlier, other heroes were summoned. Momoko Akisaka was a very ordinary girl. More precisely, she used to be. Facing a horde of monsters, she was using a second-tier Divine Scythe spell. One swing shattered the ground between the girl and the horde, killing every monster as they fell onto the broken earth. Momoko is summoned from a different world. Given the Divine Scythe skill at level 2, Momoko now fights demons to protect humans. She struggled to adapt to this world. There were no usual comforts or electronics. The food and clothing were poor, the bread could kill, the fleece made her jump on the bed, and rough clothes made her skin itch. Many of those summoned couldn't adapt and died. When Momoko was summoned, there were about 10 people, and she wonders how many are left. She figured he was gone, the man who turned out to have no skills at all. In this harsh world, most people cannot survive without skills, but Momoko Akisaka is different. She has an exceptional skill, the king values her, and she should not forget how lucky she is. This is why she fights. Alone, using one of the world's strongest skills, she cuts through monsters. The demon army seems endless, with monsters wherever you look. Facing them, she knows this is the front line, and she will not and cannot lose, so she will protect this world. At that moment, a huge dragon flew over the girl, fighting the demon king's army. Everyone below froze in fear, and Momoko Akisaka could not take her eyes off it, and shouted that it was a dragon. He was one of the world's plagues. No one could look away from him, but seeing him meant death. Even they called him a monster, so everyone wondered why he was here. Even Momoko, a summoned hero with a one-hit kill skill, could not defeat the monster, and the others called for a retreat, saying a single breath would wipe them out. Everyone feared the dragon had come to destroy them as it landed. He spoke, ordered them to listen, and addressed everyone as if they were from lesser tribes. People were amazed because they did not expect a dragon to speak. The dragon introduced herself as the daughter of Grazer, the great king of dragons, Grinzelvale. She said the master had instructed her today to return this slob he had thrown out of his paw. Astras the Heartless collapsed in front of everyone. The demons recognized her at once and ordered the others to grab her quickly. Vale said Asteris had been meant to die, but the master decided otherwise, so he ordered everyone to listen and not miss a word. Whether demon or human, she said anyone who insults her master will have their cities burned to the ground by her flame, and when she released a fiery breath into the air, everyone nearby saw the flash of fire. The surge of magic left humans and demons barely able to stand, most collapsing to the ground, and Momoko was shocked by the terrible power. Vale declared that everyone should know her master was Saint Coden, ordered them never to forget the name because the saint's enemy would become Vale's enemy, and then flew away. Many people sat on the ground, said Saint Quidun's name, and were surprised that even the dragon obeyed him, but no one knew who he was. Now at Kidden and Platty's home, they had built several buildings and plowed many fields in front of them, and Kidden was eating with chopsticks and drinking from a glass, smiling with satisfaction at the taste. He stood up and said he had to work in the field today too, looking toward the mountains and the distant view as he stretched. He heard someone approaching and turned around. A man's voice asked if he was Saint Kidden. The boy looked surprised, said yes, and asked who the man was. The man said he was the demon lord Zadin, and Kidden was confused. Temi and Baelna called out to Kedon, shouting that they had finally succeeded. Carrying the animal's body on a stick, they said Mrs. Astras had finally caught her prey and had tried very hard. Her expression changed when Zidane said her name, and she looked up, not expecting to see him. Surprised, the demon lord said she was really here, and the woman stared at him in confusion. She asked how he had found her, and he said her subordinates had left a code. Butemi and Belina watched the scene with joy, while Astros wondered why he had come. The demon lord said he had come to visit her. The subordinates watched them expectantly, and Kidden could not read the mood. Astra said she had failed the mission, so she was no longer one of the 4 kings and was of no use to him. She said Zadin had always cared for her, but she didn't want to be criticized later. The demon lord said excitedly that he didn't care because she was very important to him. These words embarrassed the woman. Platty was shocked, and Vale said she was irritated by this drama. After a while they went inside. Kidden brewed hot tea for everyone. Zidane apologized for causing them trouble by being there. He introduced himself as Zadin, the supreme ruler of all demons. Keaton asked if that meant he led the demon country. The hero asked whether leaving the country would cause any problems. Zadin said no. He explained that the demon lord's main duty is to protect the country from humans, a mission given by the previous lord, and to fulfill it, he fights on the battlefield every day. Kidden said he understood. Plates added that if you fight so much there is probably no one waiting for you at home, and Zidane said he was happy to have Asteris because she is always responsive, very capable, and irreplaceable. The woman felt embarrassed and said she did not deserve such praise, and her subordinates were glad to see it. Kidden said he would never banish Astras. Zadana agreed and said Astras had been summoned to a military court and sentenced to banishment precisely while commanding on the front lines. They did not ask the overlord and acted entirely on their own. Sedan said Astras was blamed for accidentally causing a dragon to appear and wreak havoc on the battlefield. Vale hummed indifferently, and Cadden listened, lost and silent. The man said Astras was gone when he finally came back. Kidden concluded he had come here to look for her. Taking Astro's hand, Zedant said he was very glad she was there because he did not know what he would do without her and thought he had lost her forever. Platty said everything between them was clear and their love was obvious, and the woman blushed, saying they were just childhood friends. She added that nothing would come of it for them because the ruler had to care for the whole country and their case did not deserve his attention. Seething through the conversation, Rinsel Vale ordered them to be silent, then shouted that it did not matter whether he was the master or not and that he could take Asteris and leave, while Zidane asked who she was and Asteris was very scared. The woman explained it was Grinzel Vale, the dragon that had flown onto the battlefield and stared at the demons with disdain. Zadin said, confused, that it couldn't be the girl standing in front of him. Vale said angrily that she had been asked to return Astras and didn't want to strain her wings for a rude girl who showed up on her master's doorstep. Annoyed, Kirin called to Vale, who said she understood and would remain silent. Zidane looked at them in confusion. Turning to Kedadin, he said Astros was staying with dangerous people, and her life was in their hands, and the demon lord clenched his fist and vowed to bring the woman back at any cost. Standing, he said confidently that because of that he wanted permission to fight him, which surprised Kedin, and the man added that he took his title seriously and had to show his fighting spirit. When the hero denied it, Plattyfish told him he shouldn't even dream of it, and added that her husband was the master of Vale, one of the world's disasters, and that an undead king was here as well. She asked him whether he had heard of such a thing and said he could not win. Zidane asked if it was true and Astras confirmed it. He did not deny his impression, and since the woman belonged to herself, she could go with Zidane. The hero said she came to him to find a purpose and understand her abilities, but because someone cares for her and wants her to return, it's better to listen to him. He asked about her decision, saying Zadin had told her about his feelings and she should try as well, and she felt flattered. Her subordinates were pleased, and Vale was relieved to realize she could leave. Asteris squeezed his hand and said she wanted to follow him always, whether on the battlefield or into the afterlife, and asked to be allowed to stay near. Zadin agreed and suggested she return home and never leave him again, and the woman was glad. Her subordinates were glad that their mistress was no longer untitled. Vale was pleased, and Caden shed a tear at the sight. Platty stood up from the couch and angrily told them to stop. Everyone looked at her, confused. Kin asked what was wrong, and the girl explained that with all due respect to the demon lord, he was very naive. Smarter, Woodlow spoke to the man as if he were her future husband. Zidane asked who she was, and Platty introduced herself as the princess of the mermaids. She then said the demon nobles wanted to arrange a political marriage between her and Zadin. The demon lord was stunned. Standing up, he demanded to know who had said it, since this was the first he had heard. Sitting down beside Astras, the man said there was nothing between him and Platty. Kedad nodded in understanding. He explained that anyone who marries the mermaid princess will also receive the mermaid resources. Platty nodded in agreement. Quoting the demon nobles, she said the mermaids should join them and that they would marry the princess to their king. Asteris's subordinates were surprised by the policy. Platty pointed out that the demon lord was unaware of his marriage and the expulsion of his most loyal supporter, so one of his subordinates must be plotting against him. All the demons immediately blamed Reverian. Platty said that when she became Keaton's wife, Reverian sent Astras after her, and when the mission failed he eliminated Astras, which strengthened his power. Zidane realized that returning Astras would be pointless until he dealt with him, since everyone would keep reminding him of her failure. Plenty warned that at best he would lose his supporters, and at worst be forced to abdicate the throne. Kedon was shocked by this, but Fail did not care. The hero said he was sorry, because the man was sincere and honest, and the idea of a scoundrel ruling the land of demons disgusted him. Stunned by the hero's words, Zidane and Astras heard Platty say that all the problems could be solved at once. She called out to the demon lord and Astras, saying they should return not as a lord and a subordinate, but as husband and wife. The girl suggested they get married right then and there, and the demons were shocked and confused. Timmy and Baelna were so happy they could hardly believe the demon lord and Lady Astras were getting married. Zidane said he was surprised and unsure about it too, and Platty asked what he was unhappy about. Astras blushed and refused, and Platty told her not to react that way, explaining that a woman becoming queen would be the worst possible outcome for the conspirators trying to bring her down. She added that if a demon wanted to get closest to power, the quickest way was to marry off a daughter or sister to the lord, and Kidding nodded in understanding. He said if Sedan and Astras married, the conspirators would be left with nothing. Plattyfish confirmed. She then said that was what they had decided. Embarrassed, Astras, who had not said a word, wanted to object. Angrily, the lady stared at her. The woman asked what she would have to do if they married, and the girl smiled and said it was a good question. She said that to marry you must exchange vows before God. Zadin and Astros took each other's hands and reflected on that vow before God. The demon's followers were pleased, and Cadden asked for details. Smiling, Platty said she would explain now, and excitedly told them they must take their vows before God so no one could challenge their marriage. He suddenly remembered that in his previous world, to officially register a marriage, he had to fill out a form at the district office. He still asked what exactly needed to be done for the oath. Platty praised him for the question and said they would find out now. After a while, the undead king appeared and asked why he had been summoned. Zedin was stunned that an immortal king had arrived. He confirmed the rumors that the Cent had 2 world disasters under his control, and Vale was angry to have been told this so many times before. Zedin looked at the yawning Vale and said the child was a dragon. Estrez agreed. Kedin asked Platty why she had summoned the undead king. Smiling, the girl said he would witness their wedding, and Zadin and Astra were shocked by the news. Platty said the undead king had once been a high priest, so the god would watch through him as they exchanged vows. Kedon remembered the wedding ceremony from his world. Platyfish asked the undead king excitedly what he thought, and the king said Zadin and Astras were demons and that he had served humans before becoming undead. She trembled and sank to her knees, saying she had made a mistake, and Keaton, puzzled by her reaction, asked what was wrong. Platty explained that each race worships a different god. Humans worship Zeus, mermaids worship Poseidon, and demons worship Hades. In other words, each race believes in its own god. He missed the girl's point and thought it was like calling a monk to church. The girl screamed about what she'd done. The undead king said he would try. Plenty asked in surprise if he could. The immortal king said he had gathered knowledge over more than 1,000 years, and even though religions differ, he could still pray, which made Platty very happy. Turning to Zadin and Astras, she asked if they were okay with it. The woman replied that of course she was not and thanked her. The undead king held out his hand, announced he would begin, and started casting a spell asking for prosperity that would bear fruit. Temi and Baelna looked around in fear, and Cadhin and Vale remained wary. The king kept casting the spell, saying he was drawing them into his depths and sharing the blessing of the mother goddess, so this place would become a sanctuary, asking that it be cleansed in whatever way was desired. The surrounding roar rose as the undead king shouted and raised his hand, and a huge magical seal opened in the sky as lightning struck. Estrez and Zidane scanned the area, and Cadden asked what was happening. Platty said it was the undead king's prayer, and that the air felt like it was pressing in. They spot something appearing behind the huge air currents, and turned to look that way. At the center of the magic seal, a giant man appeared in the sky, holding a staff and wearing a cloak and crown. Aster immediately recognized him as Hades, the god of the underworld, and Keaton screamed in shock. The undead king had not expected this and said calmly that he had gone too far and had summoned the god himself. Platty was amazed that someone could do that. He planned to make a holy ground for the ceremony, so a god appearing felt strange. Platty shouted that it didn't matter anymore and asked what they should do. Hades spoke up, saying no one had called him for years and asking why he was there, and the Temi and Balina instantly assumed Zeus's children had started the last war and were terrified. Zadin knelt and said it was not true. He explained the war was being fought with mixed success, that the demons should not relax their vigilance, and that Hades had nothing to worry about. The god of the underworld then asked why he had been summoned. Zadin apologized and said he was a demon lord, leaving Kidden stunned to be speaking with a god, and Zadin bowed as he explained he wanted to marry the woman he loved. They planned a wedding and prayed for the underworld god's blessing, but accidentally summoned him in person, and the king of the undead apologized. Sedan asked them to accept their sincere apologies for disturbing his peace. When Hades learned that the immortal king had summoned him, he said there was nothing surprising about it. Agreeing, he said Zidane must have no other wives to receive his blessing, and asked the lord who bowed before him whether he vowed to love only one woman for the rest of his life. Zidane said this was his wish, then vowed that as the lord of demons, he would marry only Asteris and spend the rest of his life with her. Hades replied that it was well said, extended his hand, and said he would give his blessing. After a while, the weather returned to normal, and the god of the underworld disappeared. Zadin rose from one knee and took Astro's hand. He did not think the god Hades was bad. They were all unhappy that he was so loud his shouting hurt her ears. The king of the undead agreed and said he would be more careful with his prayers next time. Joyful Platty ran up to the demons and said it was wonderful that they had received a direct blessing from God, since that was the greatest favor from heaven. The king of the undead wished for good health, easy childbirth, and fertility, and that divine punishment would fall on anyone who tried to separate them. Relieved by their success, Temi and Belina were glad, and Zidane said that, to the demons, this was the best proof of his love for Astras. Kaiden thought an oath before God would be cooler than a marriage registration. The demon lord told Kidden and Platty he was deeply in their debt, because thanks to them his dream of marrying Astras, which he had almost given up on, had come true. With happy tears in her eyes, Astras said she would never forget their kindness. Kidan waved his hands and said he had done nothing, but he was genuinely happy for her. Astras felt flattered by those words. Zedin asked if they would return immediately to tell everyone at home that she was now their queen. The woman refused Zadin, saying she would stay here a little longer. Zadin and Kidden were surprised by her decision. Grinzelvale was very unhappy and told the woman to leave. The woman said if they were already married, they should go back to their own country. Kidden called out to the girl to stop. Then he asked Astros why she truly wanted to stay. Zidane also looked at her, confused. The woman replied that she had changed and learned a lot under Caden's guidance and wanted to continue learning, adding that she wanted this to become a worthy wife as she turned to Zadin. Shocked, the man said the woman must have had her reasons, and then asked Kedon to look after Astra a little longer, while Temmie and Blena watched them worriedly. Kedon said he didn't mind, which surprised Vale, who had wanted to send them away as soon as possible to avoid sharing food, and the hero added that he simply did not know how to help, especially since they had just married, and he felt awkward separating them. Zidane asked if they would mind him staying here for a while, which surprised Astras and confused Kidden. He asked whether it would cause any harm. Platty and Vile were confused. The possible impact on the demon people was not raised. The demon lord replied that if it was only for a short time, then no. He explained that the dragon had thrown both camps into chaos, so the troops would not move while they gathered information. Kidden shouted he understood, and Vale was angry at being blamed. Zedin asked if Kidden minded, and Kidden said of course not. They could make themselves at home. Then he thought about how they would need to build a house for themselves too. She asked whether they were all right in the head and reminded them there was a conspirator among them, saying they would simply leave him. They warned that if they were not there, he would keep plotting and asked whether they really wanted that, and Astro's subordinates, Plattyfish and Kidden, thought it over. Zedin smiled confidently, said there was no need to worry because he had already handled it, and laughed darkly, while Kidden said admiringly that it was to be expected from the demon lord. Vale was not pleased. Pointing at Zadin, she said he seemed strange since there was no ship and asked how he had gotten here. Platty and Kidden were also curious. Teleportation magic, the man explained, lets you move instantly if you have coordinates, and Kidden said happily that it was very convenient. Zedin turned to Astro's subordinate Belina, who shuddered, and told her she was, after all, one of the few spatial demons. Before coming here, she left a note with coordinates, which the demon lord passed on to a port. Hugging Balina, Temmie said she was fine, embarrassing her, and Balina said she felt uneasy about having to break up because of a conspiracy. The demon lord thanked Balina for helping them out, and Vale vowed she would never forgive her. Plattyfish interrupted and said that, though she did not want to seem distrustful, there were other forms of spatial magic. The girl asked whether they would come here. Zadin told her not to worry. The coordinates for this place are encrypted, and if whoever set them up doesn't give the decryption key, they are useless. The demon lord said this place was undetectable to others. Keaton and Whale looked at him in surprise. Zidane explained that the demon race now uses space magic and clairvoyance. Using both, the magicians can see places far away. A protective field around the whole place blocks that magic. The heroes were surprised to learn that. Zedin said he had taken a big risk teleporting, but thanks to Balin, he was able to follow here. Tammy gestured toward her to indicate she was all right. Concluding they could not reach that place or even know where it was, the demon lord did not say he understood. The boy asked who had cast such a useful spell. Vale puffed out her cheeks in reply. The undead king said that if he was not mistaken, such magic was within a dragon's power. They looked at Vale. The human-shaped dragon admitted she had been exposed and confirmed her involvement, saying that after abandoning Astros on the battlefield, she returned and surrounded the whole area with a barrier. Vale was still very angry because without Astros she would have eaten more. Belena was afraid of that. Kidden looked at Vale, knelt before her, and said that she had been very worried about him, for which she was very grateful. The dragon said it was obvious, since she alone had to eat all the master's dishes, but freeloaders kept coming, and at this rate she would have nothing left, and Platty and Astro's subordinates were taken aback by the remark. Balan said she hated them over the food, and Timmy and Astros nodded. Cadden ran his hand through her hair, telling her she was good and always protected him. It pleased her, and she smiled in agreement. Keaton announced with excitement that today they'd hold a celebration for Astros and Zedin's wedding, and to reward Vale for her efforts. The undead king asked to join in, clearly excited. Kidden smiled and agreed. Zadin and Astros thanked him. After a while, they set a table outside with a huge spread of food. Kedden congratulated the demon lord and Asteris on their wedding. Zidane tried the dishes for the first time. Astros watched him excitedly, and Baitme and Belina were happy. Surprised by the taste, the demon lord said it was the first time he'd tried such a delicious dish, and Kidden said he was glad the demon lord liked it. Then the man brought Vale a huge plate of meat, and she was very happy, holding 2 spoons. After tasting it, she opened her eyes and turned into a dragon, roaring and breathing fire about how delicious the food was, and Kidden scolded her not to transform at the table or breathe fire. Returning to human form, she said she had never tasted meat that good. Zedin was amazed she really was a dragon, and Kedden smiled. He then explained it was meat from a Kurosaki deer that Asterisk had caught for them that day. and the woman had not expected that. After that, he said he had skillfully cut the meat and marinated it in magical spices, and Kitten realized the speaker had not been the only one to help prepare the dish. Vale was amazed. Laughing maliciously, she said it could not be any other way because all these lower creatures had to serve both her master and her. Plattyfish snapped that she would hit her now, and Astra said she would be glad to try. Kidding chuckled and said that despite that attitude, Vale had done a lot for them. Platty noted she still had a lot of work to do on her character. Then the girl tasted the meat and admitted Vale was right that her husband's dishes should stay secret. Zidane agreed and said such delicacies are not even found in palaces. He nodded, saying he now understood why the dragon wanted to hide this place. Astras thought anxiously. Platty asked Cadden when he learned to cook so well. Cadden looked surprised and said he lived alone and had to get by, but he did nothing unusual. He said that thanks to the skill he received, he could recreate ingredients and dishes foreign to this world, and he believes the skill makes his cooking even better. The man handed the plate to the undead king and said he was glad they liked it, whatever it was. Astra stepped up to him and asked whether his dishes were a state secret. Vale said it was a state secret, and Kitten rejected the idea that it was not a secret. Then the woman knelt and faced the boy, who looked surprised and asked what had happened. Astra said she wanted to ask him again and asked him to take her into his service and teach her what a good wife should be able to do, which surprised Kitten and the others. Many people angrily demanded to know why Astros was asking someone else's husband about this. The woman apologized and gave a guarded chuckle, saying she could not do that. Angry, Platty frowned and said she could only swing her hand chops. Kedon reassured her that she was good at many other things. He said it was because of her that he grew the crops and cooked delicious dishes, and Platty was very happy to hear this and looked at him lovingly. Kitten turned to the demon queen Astras and told her it would be better if someone like Koku looked after her. She refused, saying she had to overcome every difficulty herself as the demon lord's obedient wife. Baitme and Baelina were proud of their mistress. Cadden smiled and said she seemed sincere. Zedin paused, then turned to Cadden and asked if he could train too. Cadden looked surprised and asked what he meant. A man asked him if he wanted to take the wedding training to Zadon agreed and said it was a very interesting place. Everything here fascinates him, not just the kitchen but also the harvest for their own buildings, so he understands why Astros wants to study here. He also wants to reciprocate the woman's desire to support her, as her husband does. He also explains how married partners should support each other, as Keaton does. He was flattered to hear those words, and Plattyfish said it was expected because he was unlike other kings who just sat there looking regal in their castles. Sedan said again that he was counting on St. Kidden, and Asteris confirmed it. After a while, the orcs and goblins were building a new structure, and Zedin, working with them, asked Keaton how he was doing, and Keaton said he was doing great. He said he was very skilled with his hands, and he appreciated it. At that moment, Astros called out to the man. Wearing an apron and mittens, she carried out the food and said it was ready. Zidane blushed deeply, and when Astros asked why he reacted that way, he said it was nothing, feeling like he was in heaven. The hero sat at the table outside again, piled high with food. Keaton said how delicious it all was. Vale backed him up by eating quickly, and Plattyfish praised Astros and noticed the Demon King was crying from the taste. He asked the name of the dish, and Asteris said it was Nikujaba. Kedden pointed out that Asteris made most of it herself. Zadin couldn't believe it. The man said that because she was a swordsman, she was already comfortable handling a kitchen knife, and all that remained was for her to learn the techniques and the characteristics of the ingredients and seasonings, or she could leave. Baitme and Belena supported her, and she thanked them before thinking about what else was needed for the engagement. Amy said it was obviously clothes, and that they needed to learn to sew, then looked at the Demon King, realized he was wearing a normal shirt, and Zidane said he got it from St. Kidane. Bitemio was surprised that Kedon did this, but Kedon agreed, saying that since he was a man he could make clothes for other men too. He already promised to make clothes for Plattyfish, but he just can't come up with a design. He said he already had some fabric with him, took it from the table, and asked them to wait a moment. Kedon brought 3 rolls and said that this was all he had, but he was surprised by it, and excitedly said that she had never seen such beautiful fabric before. He said he had explored a mountain dungeon before and found a caterpillar that spat threads. As an experiment, he tried bringing some home and built special enclosures for them. Platty was surprised he did that. Keaton explained how he got the chance to make this fabric from caterpillars. Everyone fell silent with surprise. Temi, holding the roll of fabric in her hands, could not believe fabric could be made from caterpillar excrement, and Balina said his ideas were too unique for this world, as one would expect. Then Baitme's eyes lit up, and she asked if it was okay to make girls' clothes from fabric made from caterpillars. Keating asked if she could do it, and Aster's subordinate agreed, saying her parents owned a fabric store so she knew all about it. Asteris was surprised because she did not know about it. Belina said it was wonderful. Temi asked that it be given to her. Cadden said she was his savior, and Asteris volunteered to help since it was part of her training. Batemy said she wanted to start by making clothes for Miss Platty. Miss Platty smiled and agreed, curious to see what they could make. Batemy pulled out a rope and said that once everything was settled, she would start by measuring its parameters. She tugged the rope with an evil smile. Plattyfish did not understand her expression. Kitten thought it was impossible for him. Knowing they were making Plattyfish's clothes first, she said she would make clothes for everyone and politely asked to measure them all. Plattyfish asked how she wanted them to undress. After that, she made a small hand motion that made Batemy scream and blush, then asked if Platty had always gone commando, and the girl asked what commando meant. She remembered that when they first met, he reacted the same way. Asteris had pointed out that she really was a mermaid and didn't know she needed to wear clothes on her lower half. Plattyfish asked whether this was a problem, and Batemy, surprised by the question, replied that it was. Astros said that for demons and surface dwellers, showing their lower half in public is a crime. Many people cried out at the words and asked why no one had told her about this. Asteris said no one had thought she would walk like that. The mermaid princess then remembered sometimes seeing her brother put something on his body, and she explained it was called underwear. Platty said, summing up, she had realized lingerie was formal wear meant for diplomatic address, but Tammy thought Platty still considered it formal. Then she asked eagerly to be given everything, promising to show why those clothes were wonderful. Plenty said she didn't fully understand, but was counting on her. As the girl took measurements, Batemy asked Petty to pull in her stomach, which made Petty blush, and Petty said she had never been so bothered by her husband's eating before, while Batemy said that was normal. The girl kept measuring the others and said Miss Astro's belly was fuller than she expected. Belina called it the power of love, and Astros, embarrassed, told her to be quiet, while Vela wondered what these pests were doing. When the work was finished, Budemy said happily that the ruffles on her dress were inspired by sea waves and their blue color, and that they suited a mermaid princess like Platty. Kitten and Zedden liked it very much. Batemy asked Platty if she did too. Platty said it was unusual and that she was pleased. Kitten thanked her and said he was very happy. Batemy felt embarrassed by that. Platty approached him and he said it really suited her. She added that Batemy had also made underwear for her. Caden blushed at that, and Platty asked whether that was also unacceptable. He agreed. The mermaid princess said it did not matter because it was wonderful when her brother did it. Keaton thought that next time he would definitely be that close to his wife's brother. Vale stared oddly at Platty's clothes the whole time, formed a fireball in her hand, and threw it at Platty. The girl screamed loudly, asking what she was doing while staring at the ball. Kitten was confused and asked what was wrong with her, assuming she was jealous, and Vale told him to just be quiet and watch. The flames died out and the dress was completely unharmed. The mermaid princess watched, puzzled. She touched it and wondered why it wasn't even burnt, since there were no scorch marks. Vale explained the fabric had a lot of anti-magic woven into it. The dragon in human form said she was sure this also offered strong protection, and that the dress was much better than normal armor. Platty asked what Batemy had done to him, but a confused Batemy said she had done nothing. Baelna said that if that was true she wanted to know why, and Platty suggested the caterpillar might have that ability. They asked Kidden if he had done anything with the caterpillars, and the boy said he had only treated them gently while hoping to make good clothes for Plattyfish. Vale said she was sure of that, and explained that the orcs and goblins had changed after meeting Keaton, and the same change had likely happened to this caterpillar. The boy said he understood, and Vale was surprised that this marked the birth of another legendary armor, but Temi replied that it was not armor but fashion. They all turned to Batemy and told her to hurry and make the same armor for her. Batemy still objected that it was not armor. Kidden was grateful for such durable clothing. Since the Demon King's clothes were originally made from cotton, meant for futons, they might ask Boatme to remake them. Zidane said it was just another daily surprise, and at that moment a store looked at him, catching his attention. She noticed his clothes were a little torn and thought he must have caught them on something while working. Noticing a small cut on the side, he said he couldn't believe he had made a hole in the shirt Kidden had given him. Astra offered to fix it, then blushed and admitted she'd only just learned it, so she wasn't very good yet. The demon lord looked at her and thanked her, saying he'd leave it to her then. Everyone watched as Zadin took off his shirt, while Asterisk stitched the hole closed. Kidden figured it was fine for the Demon King to keep the shirt a little longer. All the action took place in the human kingdom. A voice said it hated the dragon. It was the king's voice. The king, sipping from a glass, reflected that because of the dragon, the war had reached a dead end. The advisor reports that the frontline generals still do not know why the dragon appeared, so they told the army to hold position, and the king is outraged at the army and its generals for their cowardice. He asks about the dragon's master, calling the person sent Kitten, but the advisor says there is no information. Sipping from his glass, His Majesty declares that everyone here is useless. The advisor apologizes sincerely. Then the king throws the glass on the floor, and the advisor sees it all. The king orders the advisor to bring another glass of freshly squeezed fish juice. The advisor immediately agrees with the king. The advisor can't understand how the king can drink this nasty stuff. The king says this situation is simply terrible. Sighing, he thinks they could have won the centuries-long war. His Majesty Junxus XVIII must end the war between humans and demons. To win, he used all the Mana country's power to summon heroes from a parallel world. His Majesty believes that defeating the demon race will let them use their power for their own purposes and for the country, and that will be enough. And at that moment, the advisor brings fish juice to His Majesty. His Majesty said they must deal with the dragon first, then asked his advisor if he believed the dragon's master existed. The advisor replied that many people doubted that as well. The advisor warns that a wrong move will only provoke him, and if the dragon returns, destruction will be certain. The king sipped his juice and ignored the advisor's words. A sudden thought of destruction struck him, and he immediately came to his senses. The king slams his glass down on the throne, sending juice splashing everywhere. The king orders his advisor to find Sankethan. If Sankethan becomes one of their subjects, they will certainly be able to win. The advisor says this may be true, but wonders how to locate this person. His Majesty says the advisor should form a search party of capable heroes. The advisor reports rumors of a civil war in the demon capital. Growing angrier, His Majesty says he does not care. His Majesty announces he will temporarily disband the army. The monarch orders all the country's resources be dedicated to St. Codon. His advisor immediately agrees. The monarch vows he will find St. Codon, and when he does, humanity will declare victory. At that moment, in another place and another time, a house stood in the classical Japanese style, and inside a man poured a drink into a cup while he and a woman enjoyed a pleasant time. The man says it's been 2 months since they arrived here. The girl says they could learn a lot. After taking a few silent sips, he sighs and suggests to the girl they get the feel of the sword again, then takes out the sword and studies it with excitement. Asteris asks the demon king about his concerns, and he tells her the holy sword Ain't Loth is agitated. The demon king says the sword seems to resonate with someone, and Asteris goes quiet for a moment before remembering something. After a while, they go to a place to look for the Holy Lord Cadden. Cadden calls out that he is here and asks the Demon King what his concern is. The Demon King speaks to the Holy Lord, who is holding a sword, and asks what Kitten is holding. Keaton says this sword is very useful and can cut through anything, and he just used it to cut mana metal. Plattyfish says it's the sacred sword they retrieved from the dungeon of the teacher's undead king, and that it is being mishandled. The Demon King never expected the swindler's Holy Lord to possess the legendary devil sword Drishvar's. Norio said he planned to return it to his teacher, but the sword would not let him go. The Flesh Princess tells Norio that he protected her from the undead king. Norio replies that he had no choice then and did not understand the power the gods had given him. Norio's words surprised the Demon King and the girl beside him. The Demon King says that, according to the legend he knows, a saint's power granted by the gods can even become the power of a hero. Norio remembers the undead king's teacher saying something similar, and the Demon King turns to Lord St. Norio, assuming he might be one of the heroes humanity summoned from a parallel world. Norio thinks for a moment and tells the Demon King that some of what he said is true. The Demon King doubts Norio's words. Norio, a bit excited, admits that, as the whole team suspected, he really came from a parallel world, and Nor, surprised, says Norio has no fighting skills and was kicked out of the war by the Demon King. So Norio began a nomadic life here, living far from other humans. The Demon King cannot believe it. The girl turns to him and asks if it was supposed to be difficult. Norio says it is not, kneels down and takes a handful of earth. Clenching his fist, he demonstrates his power by growing a small flower from an ordinary handful of soil. Surprised, the Demon King watches this bud sprout. Noria says it is a gift from the gods, meant for a peaceful life. Understanding everything, the Demon King said it might be a miraculous power, but not suitable for battle, so to become stronger than the undead king, Noria must act. Noria suddenly says he can use the power he was given for other things. For example, he can reveal the potential in anything he touches. Stunned, the Demon King and Astros see the full force of Dry Schwartz's Devil Ball. Norio says being the strongest because of power means nothing. The Demon King says in a slightly shaky voice that no one in this world could possess Norio's power. The Demon King considers the power the gods of humanity have given Norio and asks him whether he wants to prove he is superior to humans and return to his kingdom. Nor replies that he will not do it. It might seem rude to the Demon King, who is waging war on the human race, but Norio is not connected to any of them. Noria says he belongs to no one so he can marry Princess Platty. Princess Platty shyly turns to her husband. The Demon King also turns to the Holy Lord Norio. He says the Light Lord is right, and if he weren't here, they'd become increasingly harsh toward the mermaid race, who are also taking part in their war. Turning to St. Coden Norio, the Demon King says his existence is vital to the world and proposes a toast to hope and a smooth outcome. In Norio, St. Claude looks at the Demon King with surprise and excitement. Then they shake hands and Norio confirms the Demon King's words. After a while, the Demon King and a girl named Asteris returned to the Lord Saint, saying they had punished those who had been having fun while they were away. The Demon King says they should purge the traitors a bit more to win sympathy nationwide. Norio is delighted by the Demon King's actions. Norio admires how well they planned everything and says he thought they were just enjoying their honeymoon. Vale asks the two girls standing behind why those two never ride with the Demon King. The girls are a little embarrassed by his anxious question and say that as long as they are here, the Demon King can return at any time. Vale instantly turns into a dragon and says the Migam will take these girls to the land of demons, while Norio tries to calm Vale down. The sea invites the Demon King to come to him to restock his food, and one of the girls introduces herself as Baelna and says she will fulfill her role by connecting the king to this land. The Demon King and Asterisks thank Baelna for her help, while the Demon King shows interest in another girl named Batami, who says she will stay here because she is Baelna's friend. Baitma asks the Demon King for permission to stay and keep making clothes, which would be a great option for Norio. Batama then approaches Miss Astras with a slightly embarrassed but thoughtful expression, and Astras understands nothing. Suddenly she is wearing a gorgeous dress, but Emma says she sewed it for the one and only Miss Astras, with whom the Demon King fell in love. A small, bittersweet sadness touched the girl, and she thanked Baitme. The Demon King offers an asterisk to move forward, and she immediately agrees. A magic circle appears behind the Demon King and Asterisk, and they say goodbye to all their friends, promising to meet them again. Everyone in the company wishes them luck. After a while, a portal opens and the Demon King and Asterisk jump in. Facing Astras, the Demon King admits he long believed he could never end the war peacefully between demons and humans. Still confused by the Demon King's words, Astruz says the Lord Saint's existence showed him that what he had given up was not just a dream. Astros steps up to the Demon King. He asks her to lend him the power for his dream. She agrees without hesitation. Long before the Demon King returned to his country, Noria approached a man and asked him to compete. That man was the Demon King, who took a long time to consider the offer. The Demon King really wants that experience and to find out how strong St. Kitten is, but Noria is not good at handling the ball, so they need something simple. An arena appears on the ground. Norio suggests playing sumo, and when the Demon King asks again, Norio explains that sumo is a game where two people stand facing each other. He explains the rules further, saying both fighters must stay inside the circle, and the Demon King immediately says they will fight until one cannot move, but Noria refuses. Noria steps closer to the Demon King and grabs him, telling him to try holding his opponent the same way. Norio says the Demon King cannot hit his opponent. Instead, he must try to pull him out of the circle. Strikes of any kind are forbidden. The king understood everything and said it looked simple, and Norio agreed. Then the Demon King took a stance and challenged Norio to a fight, and Norio agreed to only one match, which the king accepted. Facing each other across the circle, they begin their battle. They collide sharply and without delay. Norio tries to push the Demon King out of the circle, but he stays inside. Norio suddenly remembers he knows many sumo techniques, so he tries one on the Demon King, who is caught off guard and is thrown to the ground. The Demon King was confused about what had happened, and Norio began to apologize, saying it had been unexpected. The Demon King tells the Lord Saint to leave the fight again. The saint agrees and calls Okubo, and a voice asks for help. The Mermaid Prince appeared. Turning to San Kitten, he cannot make sense of what is happening. The Demon King is baffled and surprised by the Mermaid Prince. The Mermaid Princess is confused by the Demon King's presence. Norio asks the Mermaid Princess to calm down and offers him an idea. The Demon King and the Mermaid Prince clash in a sumo match as Norio serves as referee in the arena, telling them they are still in the ring, and the fight goes on. Kubo and Ogre suddenly calls out to Nor. Norio asks the district to gather more guys. Many beast people enter the ring and fight one by one. They all remain in the ring and cannot push each other out of bounds. Everyone at the company found the fight fun and felt it met their needs. Over time, sumo became popular among them. After long battles, Prince Arwana emerged as the champion. Norio never imagined mermaids could stand so well on their feet. After a while, a voice in Norio's house announces the bread is ready. A girl bites into it with a crunch. The princess in the dress is delighted by how soft the bread is. Vale loves the bread too. The girls also enjoy the bread, noting that food is the same in every world, though the taste and texture differ. The princess asks what her husband means by bread, and Norio confirms, explaining it is a staple in his world and that wheat flour can be used to make other foods. Norio calls it another addition to his repertoire, and Vale appears, asking him to hurry and make more for her. Before anything else, the Lord Saint says he wants to prepare one more thing, a real food product from his world that he plans to grow next. This product is rice. The girls stand in shock, unsure what kind of rice is meant. Vale begins to wonder how this rice will taste. Lord Saint explains these are slightly sweet white grains that resemble wheat but are completely different. The princess is a little shocked by her husband's words. Norio says rice is produced in the same way as wheat. Stunned by her husband's words, the flesh princess turns to him and says they need to make some adjustments. The princess says right now the organ team is in charge of construction projects, and all these orcs are doing field work. The member who joined after the demon race escaped Handel's sewing. Belna manages the roots and helps others when someone is short-handed, and the team also includes a foolish dragon. Vale says she protects this place from invasions, makes channels in the fields, and can move buildings. The princess agrees and says everyone is busy with their duties. The princess appears, furious that they use so much power to prepare the wheat, including harvesting, grinding, and thrashing, since it is a labor-intensive process, and the girls agree with her. The princess starts screaming that she's the only one handling medicine and fermenting food. Everyone else is shocked by her words and realizes they made a mistake. The princess lists her duties, preparing fertilizer for the fields, making meat and soy sauce at the brewery, and producing yeast while managing the cold storage. The princess stands and says she cannot handle all these duties alone. Her husband drops to his knees and bows his head, asking forgiveness. Tears fill his eyes because he wanted to do so much and didn't account for how much work they'd have. Calling himself a terrible husband, he is calmed by the princess, who says it's okay since he understands everything. Claiming it's all for the sake of good food, the wolf asks the princess to be patient for a little while, and the princess tells Vale to be quiet. A voice cuts into the princess and Vale's conversation. It belongs to the mermaid's prince, brother-in-law. Noria asks for his forgiveness and calls him a terrible husband. Brother-in-law is confused and asks the princess to explain. He says that after negotiating with the saint, they agreed to sell pickled radishes, so he came to buy some. The princess is instantly furious because her brother-in-law ordered so many radishes. He tries to calm her down. The princess says their neighbor, the immortal king, loves this radish. She then asks you and the rest of the team why you like fermented food so much. The brother-in-law replies that the food is tasty and healthy. They say the bread is also very tasty, and the girls confirm it. They add there are many kinds of fermented food. The girls say that, though they are from the demon tribe, they are not strong in pharmaceutical magic. The princess becomes very angry and says her work harms people. Her husband then breaks down in tears and asks her to forgive him. Suddenly, the princess had an idea. She said her brother-in-law arrived at exactly the right time. I thought of a wonderful plan to find people who could share her workload and others who specialize in pharmaceutical magic. The princess asks her brother to bring some people from the mermaid kingdom here. Her brother-in-law does not understand her meaning, and the princess says she will raise the price of pickled radishes. Then the processum turns to her dear husband, who replies that if it is possible, he is more than willing, and the Holy Lord then turns to his brother-in-law, who thinks about it. The princess pleads with her brother, because she also wants to taste the rice from her beloved husband. Norio feels a little embarrassed by his wife's words. After a moment's thought, the brother-in-law says sending the sea inhabitants will be difficult, and Norio asks him again. Sharina turns to the Holy Lord and asks if the mermaids are afraid of the shore, and Norio at first thinks they hate him, but the dress suddenly begins to appreciate it, and although Sharina finds it hard to speak, he still decides. He calls the princess of the Pei a real weirdo, and at that moment, the brother-in-law's sister begins to get angry and stand up. She cannot understand why her brother-in-law spoke so abruptly. He considers her words and says that any ordinary mermaid regards the land as a hellish place. The girls understood it too, since all mermaids are fish. Brother-in-law says sea creatures can usually live on land. That means platyfish, who chose to live on land, is a rare specimen. The brother-in-law says the flesh medicine lets him move easily between land and water. Princess Platty feels pleased by his words. Before that, it was all fiction. Rules forbade causing side effects in land dwellers, such as losing their voices, turning into bubbles, or dissolving. Velu appears and says all the mermaids should remain in the water, but the brother-in-law said this was impossible and that the goods were necessary as a resource for the same diplomacy. My brother-in-law says that until a strong medicine appears, most sea creatures will not come onto land on their own. Sharange keeps saying that as medicine improves, a new system must be created to expel criminals, and the sea and the others are surprised by the brother-in-law's words. Shorn says that in addition to the most severe punishment, they use exile instead, and without an antidote, those exiled must live out their lives on land in the wild. The Lord, the Saint, and everyone else are stunned by the brother-in-law's words. He says the shore will always be hell for the sea dwellers. It will be easier for the princess than for her brother to do anything about it because he is the prince of the mermaids. The law instead requires flesh assistants to have a high level in potion brewing. However, even if they use a royal command to work with people, they must remain on the ground for a long time. The princess agrees with her brother-in-law and suggests sending the exiled criminals here, leaving Shorin and the rest of the company stunned. Shirk screams and panics because he cannot do this since the Kingdom of Mermaids owes a debt to the Holy Lord, and they cannot use the Holy Lord's lands as a prison. The Lore Flower says there is nothing wrong with that. Norio doesn't want to put the board at risk. Shorn says the Holy Lord, as usual, isn't afraid of anything. Most likely the criminals will be the ones in danger. Vale suddenly turns into a dragon and says that everything irritates her and that we burn anyone who comes here. Platty turns to her brother and says that if he still wants to eat pickled radishes, he will have to bring 3 assistants. The Princess of Flesh doesn't care if her assistants are criminals, and if they're talented, she welcomes them. The Princess of Flesh vows her actions will bring them to heaven. Her husband starts apologizing for driving her into a corner. After a while, Sharon finally arrived with help. 3 half-naked girls stood before Norio. Vale does not know if it is normal to have criminals under his command. Norio says this is not normal at all. Clearing his throat slightly, he apologizes for disturbing the Lord's Saint and reintroduces the girls, saying not to call the one on the right a pufferfish, the one in the center an anglerfish, or the one on the right garufa. Norio doesn't understand why our brother-in-law brought the girls, but he says they are criminals and asks Norio to keep a close eye on them. Lord St. Norio thanks these girls for coming, introduces himself as Kedon, and says he is glad to meet them. Pufferfish remembers to print what he said about the man. The angler doubts the landowner's abilities and is surprised she has to work for him. Gara Rufa does not want to do anything. A voice interrupts, and Princess Platty tells the girls to get ready, leaving them all surprised and shocked to see her here. The icy cold witch Rafa, the hellfire witch Runpai, and the epidemic witch Gara Rufa looked at the company in surprise. The brother-in-law declares these girls criminals as of today and assigns them to work in a penal colony under the supervision of his sister, Princess Platty. Rompus stammers, trying to speak, then tries to jump into Princess Lady's arms with a satisfied look as brother-in-law Noriel watches in bewilderment. Rumpai drops to one knee at once. She has not seen Princess Plattyfish for a long time. Her brother-in-law and Norio watch in surprise. Rampai can hardly believe she will serve the princess again. Tears well up in her eyes, and she tries to hold them back because to Rampai this is the height of bliss, but she cannot stop them and breaks down in front of the princess. The girl tells the company that Ron Pai is the criminal. Her brother-in-law backs her up. The 3 of them are known for their bad reputation in their country. Rafa smirks and says Ron Pai is only famous for clinging to the royal family. Rufa interrupts, pointing out that Rafa is in love with Prince Erwana, which is why she always shows up. Rafa grows indignant, shouting that she simply wants to show life outside the sea instead of sitting in a cage forever. Then Rafa thinks it over and replies sarcastically, and Noriel realizes these girls do not get along very well with each other. Rufa does not know what to do. Ronpai vows to serve the princess. Pei will continue until her body turns to dust. She will gladly destroy humanity with all her power. Pei does not understand who asked her about it or when they asked. Rafa asks them again. She is already prepared to help destroy humanity. Platty says the idea is cancelled so they can moderate their art. Norio asks Sharon which crimes the 3 of them committed, and though bewildered, Sharon tells the story. He says that in the land of the mermaids, 6 magicians used beastly potions and were called the crazy 6 witches. Sharon brought only 3 of them here. Norio and the girl beside him asked Sharon to repeat himself. He says he will first tell Rafa's story. Rafa can sense mana flowing along the ocean floor and tried to create a way to control it artificially. She thinks there is nothing wrong with it. Shirin says if Rafa could control mana, she would seize every water source and destroy all people and demons. Norio is frightened by Shirin's words. The brother-in-law says Rafa is not only an extreme radical, but also a master of her craft, which is why she had to be imprisoned. Norio understands everything that is happening. He then asks about the girl with glasses. The brother-in-law says she is Gara Rufa and a terrible criminal. Norio is a little shocked. Rufa originally held a lot of authority as a specialist in the mermaid medical community. Norio admires her a little and says it's great to be doing work like that. According to brother-in-law, Rufa once proposed a strange theory, then she suddenly interrupted him, feeling a little disappointed that no one understands the charm of her experiments. Rufa eagerly explains his theory that some diseases are caused by tiny invisible creatures. Brother-in-law does not and will never understand Rufa's enthusiasm, and Norio guessed that the invisible creatures Rufu was referring to were microbes. Norio paused for a moment and remembered the princess. Platty, too, was very surprised when he told her about yeast and fermentation. Rufa screams, telling them to listen closely, and explains that when the body remembers these tiny creatures it can resist them, and Norio notices and says Rufa means an immune response. Rufa kept talking about his crazy theory that if you collected blood from someone who had recovered once and injected it into someone who had the disease more, their body would be able to resist, and Norio realized he was talking about a blood transfusion. Shirin exaggerates a little, saying that injecting one person's blood into another could kill the recipient. Rufa appears and does not understand the contradiction in Shirin's statement. Norio finds Rufa's explanations understandable because he is from another world. Norio then asks about the girl kneeling before the princess. Pay up. Brother-in-law says this girl is also a problem. Shirin explains that this girl originally served in the king's personal guard, and Norio appears to ask why someone like her was imprisoned. My brother-in-law says it's all about his sister, or more precisely that she's unmarried, and that when proposals for a political marriage began pouring in from demons and humans, the mermaids were divided. Shirin says that once an aristocrat from the mermaids' neutral opposition opposed the marriage itself and presented that objection directly to Shirin's father, the king. My brother-in-law said there was no risk if the engagement suddenly fell through and that with time they would back off. The remark was calm. The law says the aristocrat then said something he should not have said and added that the princess knows nothing except her medicine. It does not matter who she marries. She will still not be able to cope with the role of a wife. Hearing that, Ronpai flew into a rage and with an angry look beat the aristocrat on the spot until there was no sign of life. Ronpai's sudden appearance interrupts Shirin's story, frightening her, and she says the incident was not her fault. She blames the aristocrat who insulted Platia, and the brother-in-law tells Norio that Ronpai denies guilt, so she was put in jail to cool her temper. The brother-in-law apologizes for bringing these abnormal girls, and Platty says nothing can be done about his actions now. Norio asks Platty if she will be okay, and Platty is embarrassed happy and delighted that he is worried about her, while her brother-in-law, with a calm expression, says she will be okay. Plattyfish angrily confronts Shirin, saying he should not have been responsible for her. Shirin then wants to tell Mr. Norio one thing about the princess. Plattyfish is one of the crazy 6 witches. Norio grows worried about her, but she cannot remember any of her crimes. Her brother-in-law says Platty is the worst of the witches, that she caused the emergency by using forbidden medicines, and that no one can challenge her because of her attitude toward the royal family. All of this had earned Plattyfish the nickname Crown Witch. Norio realized his wife was a witch and could not stop thinking about it. The brother-in-law leaves everything to Platty, saying only she can calm one of the 6, and Platty asks them to rely on her. Platty was delighted by the event because it meant she would have much less work, and her brother-in-law, Norio, and the girl looked at her with bewilderment and surprise. Ronpai says admiringly that she will serve the princess again, adds pay, and calls this place literally heaven on earth, and Rafa thinks about her words and asks what kind of place this is. Norio says the owner of this place is a guy named Kitten. Rafa and Rufa think the place belongs to humans, though they saw a girl with a scrap of cloth that looked like a demon. A goblin and an ogre come up to Norio to announce the pizza oven is finished. Norio thanks Okubo and Gabunchin for their work. Shocked, the witch girls could not believe an ogre and a goblin were talking with Mr. Norio, and they wrongly assumed they were in the land of demons. Vale interrupts, saying that for girls like them, their thoughts mean nothing and their job is to quietly help the mermaid make even more delicious food. Puzzled, the girls look at Vale, unsure why such a small child would be so protective of them. Vale does not like what they said and begins to glow, filling the space with light. The girls do not understand what is happening. Vale transforms into a dragon and says she is a head taller than the girls. The witch team is frightened by such a massive transformation. They can't understand why the dragon linked to the two world disasters ended up here. Garufa suddenly faints from shock. Norio tells Vale she will get no food unless she keeps quiet. Vale calms immediately, and Norio announces a pizza party today to celebrate the three witches' arrival. Vale has never heard of pizza, so Norio tells her she will know what it is once she tries it. Rafa doesn't know who this guy is. Platty declares that this man is her husband. Rampai and Rafa stand stunned and deeply shocked by her words. Rampai then loses consciousness and falls to the ground. A voice spoke, and Rafa turned to see a living skeleton in a robe and hat, thanking them all for inviting them to the party for newcomers. Rafa says in a trembling voice that this is the immortal king. She is deeply shocked that two global disasters have come together in one place. Rafa then loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Platty says the party will not start until these girls wake up. After a while, the ramp opens her eyes. On a cozy bed, she was lying. Suddenly, she jumps up from the bed. Her friends were already waiting for her. A quiet silence fills the room. The building is decorated in a beautiful wooden style. Ronpai doesn't know where she is, and Rafa says they are in an oddly built house that smells nice and has a very soft bed. Rampai starts to remember that Prince Sarawana brought them to the surface to work as penal labor, and then one of the maids, Belina, unexpectedly enters their room. Shocked, the girls stare at her and realize she is from the demon race. Belina says St. Coden has given them a covenant and asks them to go to one place. The girls do not understand what holy throwing is being discussed. Suddenly, Rampai remembered who they were talking about. After a moment, Rampai called Princess Platty. Princess Platty turned toward Rampai's call as Rampai ran frantically toward her. Dropping to her knees before the princess, she calls her pitiable and unhappy for being forced to marry a demon on this hellish land. The princess doesn't understand which hellish land they mean and insists the man is her husband. The mermaid asks again, and Rampai vows never to forgive Kadhin and will send him to the next world. The other mermaids followed Rampai and questioned the princess about a man controlling land claimed by demons, and Belena replied that it was not demons' land. Explaining this place will be difficult for everyone. The princess confirms it, and when Rufa asks, she says it is a completely independent territory. She says this is the village of St. Codon. The girls don't understand her and say it can't be, especially because calling it a village feels rude. They fear people and demons could start a war here. Someone claims this war can be calmed quickly, but the ramp is frightened by the unexpected presence. Ron Pai remembers the girl. The girl introduces herself as Grinzel Vale, a dragon. The ramp then remembers she seemed to have seen the immortal king, and the immortal king himself suddenly appears beside the girl. Terrified by the immortal king's sudden appearance, the mermaid girls can hardly believe it because he might send them to the next world. Belina says she was surprised at first and confirms that the immortal king and the dragon veils are protecting this place. Ronpai can hardly believe it, but he understands this land matches any country in the world, and the princess asks the mermaid girls to live here without fear, while Vale adds that they should not only live here, but also work. Vale says that today these pathetic fishtails will help feed the mermaid, and the princess replies that it is not done only for her. Rafa thinks they were brought here to be cooks. Ron Pai rolls away in tears, turns to the princess, and says she has been brought so low. The princess asks her to repeat what she said. The princess says she will take them to their workplace before dinner and asks Henbane to tell her husband, and Henbane agrees, saying she will pass the message on. Rafa can't believe they will actually be working on cooking. Rufa wanted to do some research. Ron Pai wants to plan an escape from here with the princess. After a while they reach the place. The princess opens the doors and tells the girls this is their workplace, and the mermaid girls are shocked by what they see. They noticed a strange smell, but it was not unpleasant. The princess says this is where she makes spices and other cooking ingredients. The mermaid girl saw a dark liquid, and the princess said it was soy sauce. Scooping some into a cup, the princess asked the mermaid girls to try it. The girls are surprised by where this soy sauce comes from. The princess says it is a bit like the medicine used to flavor food. Taking turns, the girls slowly dip their fingers into the soy sauce, lift them to their lips to taste, and immediately react in shock. The girls are delighted with the soy sauce's taste because it has a carefully chosen blend and multiple distinct flavors, and the princess agrees. Rampai says the princess made an amazing medicine, and the princess, puzzled, says she did not invent it. The princess says her husband told her some ingredients contain tiny organisms and microbes that make up this product. Rufa was instantly intrigued by the princess's words. She says she doesn't understand what I mean, but you can already sense this is something remarkable. The princess says they were only doing similar research, and Rufa confirms. Holding a bowl of soy sauce, Rufa realizes the tiny creatures she imagined live in it, and the princess fully confirms her observation. Rufa cried with happiness because her research assumptions were correct, and she was relieved to learn the sauce came from microbial fermentation. Overjoyed, Rufa tries to gulp down the soy sauce, but the princess stops her and warns that drinking it all at once will send her to the next world. She recounts the first time she tasted soy sauce, when her husband stopped her. Rafa feels a little offended that someone is already using her research, yet she is also happy and wants to learn more about these microorganisms because the princess is counting on Rufa. The other girls worry that the holy man is probably not as simple as he seems, and when the princess calls her husband a hero, the mermaid girls are surprised. Rampai says Rafa pays attention to nothing but his research. She explains that summoned heroes are people brought from another world to fight demons and save people. Rafa is shocked by Ranpai's claim that others in their world can have their own affairs, and replies that human baseness is no longer news. The princess says she heard the human king forcibly summoned her husband to their world, and then expelled him for being unfit for battle, so he began to live using the knowledge and abilities from his old world. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a voice. It was the Dragon Veil. She was starving, so she decided that you and Mr. were all angry with these girls. Soon the pizzas were ready. 4 different pizzas sat on 4 trays. The mermaid girls were surprised by the dishes from another world. The Holy Lord said he would now cut the pizzas into pieces. After cutting the pizza into slices, he hands out plates of pizza slices to everyone, starting with the Dragon Veil, who is incredibly happy. Rampai says the princess's husband, Lord Sankadin, is quite resourceful, and the whole group of close friends of the Lord and the princess are seated at the dining table, which is covered with food, and they all wish each other bon appetit. When the mermaid girls took pieces of pizza, they tried them one by one and were shocked because they'd never tasted food like that before. Ranpai says the food is unbelievably delicious. They can't believe it's really from another world and tastes that good. Rufa says the abundance of flavor sent her soul to heaven. Delighted that the girls liked the food, the Lord Saint smiles while Ranpai watches quietly, then gives the teacher and brother-in-law their favorite dishes, and they both admire the large amount of food. The princess suddenly remembers her older brother and tells him she will soon make a large batch of pickled radishes, asking him not to be shy and to buy some. Her brother-in-law says this is good news and he will stop by again next week. Rafa is shocked that Prince Iruwana will arrive next week and can't believe a man who is rarely seen, even by a merfolk, would come in just a week. Rufa is very pleased with what is happening. Turning to Rafa, she says she did not say anything. Norio asks his wife if they have more, and the girl replies that they do. Delighted, the princess finds her husband's dish once again beyond praise. The saint asks his beloved about the tomatoes because she loves them very much. They laugh together, enjoying each other's company. Ranpai mentally speaks to the princess and cannot understand what she admires so much about this man, though she looks very happy. Later that night, the mermaid girls go to their room and settle into a warm, cozy, very comfortable bed. Rafa says the food was really tasty. Rufus credits the tiny creatures for it all. Rampai says Kidden turned out to be a very hard worker. After Bottomy made them a bed, the girls start talking about the day. The bed felt smooth and pleasant to the touch. The material was silk, an expensive fabric woven from rare threads. The house and the futon are very cozy. The girls keep wondering what might be, and they think this is likely not a hellish place but a paradise on earth. Outside the building's walls, a deep, moonless night lay. A short time later, Rafa finishes her work. Rufa suddenly enters and interrupts, asking Rafa to help with Rufa's work after Rafa finishes, while holding out an arched object. She asks for the dried radish to be soaked in wheat miso. Rafa asks her again. Rafa laughs softly and says the wheat miso has mold in it. He finds it disgusting. This is how pickled radishes are made. Rafa believes the prince will taste food made by Rufa. Rufa likes Rafa's idea, but says she never said that. Rafa asks about Ranpai's disappearance, and Rufa says she went hunting with the orcs because she enjoys physical exercise. After some time, Ranpai walks along a path with 2 orcs. Out of the corner of her eye, Ranpai notices something. At the command, a wild boar suddenly jumps out. She resolutely prepares to strike. The boar comes closer and she cuts it in 2 with a quick, sharp blow. Orcs celebrate with joy. Rampai, the royal knight, says this is a mere trifle to her, and after a while the knight falls. In his room, the Lord Saint talks about the 3 mermaids. The princess says they really help her. She says they helped her husband and cooperated with the juices and goblins, so they finished the radish field faster. The husband says they now have seedlings that only need planting, and once they sprout, they will be able to make rice from his world. The Holy Lord says cooking rice has a special meaning for him. Turning to her husband, the princess receives no clear answer. Lost in thought, she begins to rejoice. She says they must cook the rice as quickly as possible, and her husband agrees. Soon the rice field was ready with rice sprouts and special planting boxes, but the mermaid girls did not know what to do with them. Today they will plant sprouts, and Rafa says rice must be planted directly in the water, which the princess fully confirms. Rafa pleads for mercy, admitting she will stain the clothes Batme made for her. Batme thanks her and says the clothes are meant for field work. Rufa says that after exiling the saint, this rice is one of the fermentation components used to make sake, and she is sure the drink will be very tasty and will please Prince Irohana. Rafa says they are here for this, and she is looking forward to the rice. Rufa is very happy because she will be able to work with the product of defeat. Ronpai tells the princess he will not let her get dirty, so he offers to do all the work himself and says he will go through water and fire for her. Vale will have to work even though she doesn't want to. The princess turns to her husband and asks him to show everyone how to plant rice correctly. He asks them to pick up 3 or 4 seedlings and hold them between their thumb and forefinger. He then shows them how to plant the seedlings in water. Everyone else agrees with him. The princess announces a rice planting tournament for all the villagers. They step into the water one by one. Rufa feels a little worried because the cold water gives her goosebumps. Ron Pai is surprised that Rafa is doing her job very carefully. The maid girls helped the team by bringing new seedlings, and the villagers slowly planted them in the water. The mermaid girls and Dragon Vale also joined in planting the rice, and Ran Pai is excited about something. The mermaid girls complain because the work is harder than they imagined. Rufus's legs can't take it, and Rampai's lower back hurts. Furious that this work is harder than field work, the servant girls complain. One of them can no longer stand it and falls face first into the water. Finally, she says she would like to make a couple more dresses. A saint rushes to Bateme's aid and asks how she is. Vale watches and says they are weaklings after all. The princess asks her if she is tired. Vale says she's a dragon and that her strength stays the same even in human form, and seeing the princess isn't tired, she adds that, unlike others, she has strong legs and is used to this work. They all suggest a competition to see who can do it faster, and the princess smiles, saying she won't lose to a girl who only sleeps and eats. Both girls are determined to win as the rice planting competition starts, and one of them immediately rushes forward and begins planting rice quickly. Lord St. Kidden is confused about what is happening. The mermaid girls are surprised by what they see. These two handled one strip in no time. Their rice placement is perfect. They are surprised by the impressive display and say it shows the highest skill. Right now the princess is first on the landing and the dragon is close by. The princess suddenly runs out of seedlings and asks someone to bring more. Runpai immediately grabs the seedlings and hurries to bring them to her on time. Suddenly Vila pushes Ronpai, making her lose her balance. The other mermaids are surprised by what is happening. Ronpai is quite far from the princess. The princess is shocked their field is slightly battered. Rampai says she is fine, but is surprised that even in human form Vale has dragon strength. Rampai admits she underestimated the field work and tells Princess Platty that the strength of her human legs is truly impressive. Rampai says hard work is the foundation of training. The princess agrees that may be true, but says she is not doing this just for training, and Vale appears to say it is all for eating delicious food. Vale and the princess dream of tasting rice. Rampai knows it is all about food, and the princess motivates everyone by implying they must finish cultivating the whole field today. With everyone working together, they finished everything in one day, and the princess's magical products made the seedlings grow in 1 month. At last the rice was ready. The whole company of the Lord Saint's close, dear friends stared in surprise at the steaming rice. The saint says rice can be eaten at any time, day or night. Vale is eager to taste the rice and pleads with her master to let her try it right away. The princess appears and says the husband should taste the rice first. The maids say the princess did everything she could to make the rice grow faster. The saint asks the girls again, and they confirm what he said. Legend says the princess not only fertilized the rice to speed its growth, but also sat behind the rice field and asked them to help with the necessary preparations for a good harvest. Lena laughs softly. The princess asks Lena to stop telling her story. Kidden feels embarrassed and surprised by his wife's actions. The princess asks her husband to finally taste the rice. Agreeing with his wife, Kidden pours rice into a full cup, lifts it, and carefully takes a small taste while the girls behind him watch expectantly. The Lord Saint picks up a small grain of rice and slowly brings it to his mouth. The princess waits eagerly for her husband's reaction. He says it is incredibly delicious and even tears up with pleasure. The princess looks at her husband, a little shocked. Vale appears, says it tastes so good her eyes are filling with tears, and asks him to let her try it right away. Saint asks Vale to wait while he prepares the side dish so she can enjoy the full spectrum of flavor. Rampy says the princess tried hard to make this man smile. She is glad she did her best, and Rafa also understands her friend perfectly. Rafa says she never said anything like that. When the princess asks her husband why the rice matters to him, he suggests it might be because it is the national food of his world. Her husband agrees, but he has one reservation. He also wanted to thank everyone who helped him. Turning to his wife, he thanks her for helping him. Norio turns to Hephaestus and asks how she is, because he owes his life and happiness here to her. Apologizing for being late, he hands her the onigiri with gratitude and asks her not to be shy about tasting the fruits of their joint efforts. The princess warns her husband that this food can be dangerous. At first, since it had no flavor, she did not see what was so appealing about it. The rice becomes incredibly tasty when eaten with other dishes. The girls agree with the princess, saying they no longer want to return to a place without such food, and Fail asks her master for more food. The saint believes the girls really like the rice. Rafa says rice is very scary. Vanity says now that they have rice, he wants to cook other dishes. Platty and Val are shocked by what they heard and don't understand that more dishes will be served, because they didn't know rice could be improved by adding other dishes. Vale jumps up suddenly and says she will return to her dungeon and raise the difficulty, leaving Saint a little shocked, while the princess says it is a good idea. Keaton can't see how that relates to rice. The princess says raising the dungeon passages level can cause monsters that weren't there before to appear. Vale fully agrees with the princess and says this can improve the flavor of rice and other dishes, and Kitten did not know such a thing could be done in the dungeon. Rafa says only highest-ranking creatures like dragons can change the dungeon because it follows its own standards, and the overflowing mana warps the space inside. The princess says only one of the two world disasters can change the dungeon. Vale confirms it. Kitten remains wary of her words. Rafa never expected so many miracles to come together. Rafa finds this place incredible. Rufa remembers Rafa researching how mana flows and affects others. Rampai encourages Rafa to keep going. The princess suggests focusing on preparing the meal ingredients, while Ron Pai wants to test her strength in Lady Vale's updated dungeon, and the dragon says a weakling like her cannot challenge the dungeon. Everyone grew curious, so this time she will create several levels to see how Ron copes, and for the princess this will likely cause trouble. A few days later, Dragon Vale is ready to unveil her updated dungeon and asks the team to attack together, while Sint is annoyed by Vale's voice from the mountain top. The princess says they're only going to study new creatures, but she senses the final bosses are waiting for them, and the team has gathered to explore the Vale dungeon. Ron Pai believes the saint went with them, and the king of the people summoned him from another world, but later expelled him for being powerless. Doubting the saint can handle this multi-level dungeon, she will still protect the princess with all her strength. The team spots movement ahead and is attacked by a herd of wild boars. Ron Pai volunteers to handle them. The girl freezes in shock as the immortal king steps forward and waves his hand, and a second later the whole herd is destroyed. The immortal king says he found the adventure interesting, so he decided to go with them. At that moment, Vale addresses him. She tells him not to change her dungeon without her permission. The dragon's claws grab the immortal king by the collar. Vale says the immortal king is disqualified for cheating, but the team thanks him because he saved them and they would have struggled against so many monsters. Ron Pai says being friends with two global disasters seriously hurts her pride as a royal knight, and the team breathes a sigh of relief. She then takes back her words and says she exists to protect the princess. The couple consider changing the dungeon, but so far they have only encountered familiar monsters. Vale reassures them they are now in the old zone, warns it would be a problem if the old monsters disappeared, and says the new zone will be waiting further ahead. After some time, they reached a clearing. The princess asks her husband to be careful. They realize someone is nearby. Rampy says he senses powerful monsters close by. Out of nowhere, something appears behind Rampy, and before they can react, it leaps from the tall grass and attacks with spinning pucks. Ketten says the pucks look like UFOs. Those flying discs are heading straight for them. Spinning so fast they are razor sharp, they slice the tops off trees. The team managed to dodge. Keaton calls it a UFO, and then clarifies that the term means an unidentified flying object. Rampy says she can handle this herself. The princess warns not to underestimate her, because she has the power of a crowned witch. Ron Pai says he will do everything he can to help her. Although a little scared, Keaton still wanted to help. Taking the sword, he assumed a fighting stance. Ronpai noticed and said the sword should be held on the other side. Ronpai holds the bag and says they must first stop their breakthrough, then pulls the clasp with her teeth and throws the bag into the air. When flying objects come near, the bag slowly starts to glow and then explodes with great force. The princess remembers that the Ronpai use explosive potions. The saint understood why people call her the Witch of Hellfire. Proud at having beaten them, the girl suddenly falls silent when she sees the flying objects are unharmed, and Vale boasts of their strength. Vale says these are turtle-shaped monsters with the hardest shells of all monsters. Ranpai steps closer and says they can be flipped over to incapacitate them. Without warning, something shoots out of the turtle's head and wraps around the girl's hand, revealing ropes that slowly begin to envelop her entire body. The princess does not know who these tentacled turtles are. Gabukichai tries to free the girl but fails. The orc swings, aiming to hit the turtle's body. Striking the turtle's shell, he finds it so hard his axe simply breaks, and Ronpai is surprised too. One by one, the turtles extend many tentacles from their heads that slowly move toward the team. The princess asks her husband to handle it, and he agrees immediately. The turtle's tentacles slowly wrap around the girl's neck. The saint swings and lands a crushing blow on the tentacles. The tentacles scatter in different directions. The saint is stunned by what he has done. After that, the Holy Lord asks Ronpai about her health, and she says she is fine. Smoke drifts from the turtle's head, and the princess picks up one of the turtles and notices the sharp tentacles were their weak point. They are confused that the team defeated those turtles, but the monsters she created are among the weakest. The team will face even tougher opponents. Anna tells the team to move on to the next level. The orc says these skulls can be used as armor and shields for goblins and other orcs, and Sint confirms this. Vale asks the team not to keep her waiting. The princess appears and says they came only to study new monsters. Ronpai warns that even stronger monsters will await them ahead, and she says everything is fine. She says her husband is stronger than both the world's calamities and that he is the strongest in this world, and Ronpai is bewildered. Doubting the princess's words, she cannot believe the princess's husband is the strongest in the world. Refusing to lose heart, she will find a new goal that suits her. The team decides to take a short break. The team stopped at a spot in the forest. Surprised, Ronpai says she never expected the Holy Lord to be stronger than the immortal king and the dragon. She still cannot grasp why the human kingdom banished the Holy Lord, even though he had incredible power. The Holy Lord says he has no fighting skills. At one point, a god gave him a gift that lets him unlock the full potential of anything he touches. This lord also has a sacred ball. Ronpai is taken aback by the saint's words. Kidden says that he is therefore not so special. Ronpai says the saint's power is very useful. Princess Platty married a very handsome man, so the whole mermaid kingdom will be safe even if demons or people attack her. The sun was shining so brightly it caused glare in people's eyes. The princess says the landscape around has not changed much, but in fact it has become even hotter. The dragon's voice suddenly cuts through all the princess's thoughts, as Vale says the next scene is called a scorching hell, and the monsters best suited to it will attack them. A pack of wolves with manes like fire appeared before the team, and everyone immediately grew wary and took up fighting stances. Vale warns the hyena lichens are the most dangerous four-legged monsters here. They are strong, agile, ferocious, and grow stronger in heat. Vale says their strength and endurance make escape impossible. She turns to Lord Saint and asks how he can fight the wolves. At that moment, the wolves attack him. The princess and Ronpai were also interested in the question. Their faces suddenly changed, and they looked very bewildered. All the wolves rolled on the ground like obedient dogs. Nobody understands what's happening, but then the immortal king's voice says the hyena lichens have sensed the Holy Lord's power, and the wolves look at the Holy Lord gently and do not try to attack him. Lord Saint starts petting the regiments as if they were his pets. Slightly indignant, he is also pleased. After some time, the team was still making its way through the scorching hell, and the wolves calmly followed them the whole time without trying to stop them. The immortal king's voice says wolf-like monsters form a strict hierarchy to make a pack, so the wolves accept the Lord Saint as their leader. The wolves simply stare at the Lord Saint, Suitly, and Lord Saint looks puzzled but pleased as he meets their gaze. Then Saint admits he never thought they would like him so much without his gift. Ronpai realizes they are in a high-level dungeon. The princess warns this could be problematic, and Vale asks her to praise him, while saying even more terrible monsters await them ahead. With the wolves at his side, the team continues exploring the Vale dungeon until they reach a place blanketed in snow, and the princess cannot understand why it is so cold here. Vale announces this is the final point of her dungeon freezing hell. The princess wants to go home, and suddenly the Lord Saint turns around, causing the whole team to turn and see a monster standing behind them. A massive bear stood on all fours and stared at the team with ferocity. The bear's presence frightens the Holy Lord. The girls say this is the same immense power they felt when they first came in. This monster is a head taller than the ones they met earlier. The princess tells her husband to leave this place. The crumpled one says the monster is strong and he wants to avoid senseless destruction. The Lord knows that even he cannot escape him, and then turns to his teacher. The immortal king's voice says this bear also understands the full power of the Holy Lord. The bear is a warrior who only knows how to fight. The immortal king declares that a bear is fated to challenge the strong, and the bear roars as it begins its attack. The bear charges at the Lord's saint, and wolves suddenly appear behind the Lord and attack the bear, surrounding it from all sides because they believe this is how they show devotion to their master. Refusing to help, the saint tells Rampai to handle it, and she runs forward, drawing her rapier to stop the bear from attacking the team. She makes a sharp, quick cut to the bear's legs, and the bear growls in pain, unable to stand, then falls to the ground. Ranpai says a tendon in his paw is damaged, so he will not be able to move. The saint thanks Mrs. Ranpai, and the team wants to go home. Their friend is interrupted by Vale's voice. She tells them to stand still, and says she will not let things end like this. The bear lies unconscious as Holly calls to the girls and the rest of the team to stop. He asks his wife about the ointment he asked her to get, and Plattyfish and Rampire look slightly shocked because the saint intends to use it on the bear. Rampai warns that if they leave the bear alone, he will simply disappear, but if his enemies test his mercy, he will become very angry. The immortal king's voice seeks to turn the bear into mana. The Vale asks the immortal king not to act as he pleases. The saint turns to the teacher. Cadden doubts his thoughts. Still, he wants to save this bear because he's sure it did not come here to attack them. Most likely, the bear had a purpose. The princess must give the ointment to the Holy Lord. Kitten asks Rampai for forgiveness because she has worked so hard to protect them. Rampai says Lord Saint is too soft and doubts he can protect the country and the princess. Lord Saint readies himself for action. Keaton asks Mr. Bear to take better care of himself so he can live longer. The bear does not respond to the Holy Lord's words. All this angered the Dragon Vale. The Dragon Vale does not understand why the team broke her rules. She says she has nothing left. Her only option is to use the last resort. Velsama then appears on the battlefield and announces she will be their opponent. Rampai is stunned to learn the final boss is a dragon. Vale is delighted by the team's reaction. She told the team not to worry, saying it was only a clown with 1/100th of her strength, but even that would be enough to destroy a couple of cities. She orders the team to attack. Out of the corner of his eye, Lord Saint notices something. A bear suddenly strikes the dragon on the head. The girls stand dazed. From the blow, the dragon slowly fades and finally evaporates. Kanjian is stunned that the bear destroyed the Vale clone. Kitten and the bear exchanged glances. Esvaito cannot understand why the bear did it. After that, the bear turned sharply and slowly moved over the horizon until it was out of sight. The Orking Doblins say that because I am a monster, I do not understand this bear's feelings. They call the bear proud and say this fight is his way of repaying their master's kindness. Ukubo says the bear has gone off on his own to become a powerful monster their master will acknowledge. The saint says that if so, he and the bear will meet again. So far, she has fought to protect whoever she wants. Her actions didn't make the world a better place. Willingness to help a friend or an adversary was probably her real strength. Sometime later, in the village of the Holy Lord Kitten, the Dragon Vale stood wearing satisfied frowns. Rufa says no one was impressed by her new dungeon. When the Holy Lord speaks to the dragon, he offers her a new dish and says it is from their new menu called Katsudon. The saint says that as they came down the mountain, they finally found a bird monster that laid eggs, and after that the saint was finally able to cook the dish he had wanted for so long, all thanks to the reconstructed Dungeon of Vale. Saint says he can now improve his cooking skills and thanks Vale. Vale melts with happiness and her face and eyes shine with joy. She feels a little embarrassed. Esvaitoa asks the whole company to come to the table because the food is ready. After a short while, someone utters a strange exclamation. The company is surprised by the food's new, unique taste. The saint says that by exploring the dungeon, the team was able to obtain his long-awaited eggs. Outside, he notes that their settlements are becoming more lively. Saintly Lore looks to the future. He doesn't know what will happen to their settlement. Then elsewhere in the forest, events unfold. Two hooded strangers are talking, clueless about what's happening and surprised there is a village here. The whole team sat on the tree branches. Aileron, the head of the gang of thieves, said she had to see everything with her own eyes. The wolves were named Pachai, Pez, Khan, and Taro. a holy lord throws a bandage and tells his wolves to fetch it. The holy lord says these were the wolf monsters he met in the Vale dungeon and that they came to live with him, and he pets one of the wolves, moved by its beauty. Lord Saint says Pokey and the others are getting rid of pests and driving away stray monsters from the dungeon. One small problem remains. The wolves are fighting again over a mouse they caught. As Vaitoa sees there is not enough food for the wolves, then an idea comes to him. After a while he begins preparing meat. Vale approaches and asks what he is doing. The saint plans to cook dog food for his wolves, but Vale is unhappy that the wolves also eat their food. Vale says there's nothing funny about it and breathes out a small flame, saying she will deal with the wolves herself. Saint says that's not necessary, and the wolves already belong to their family. Vale remains dissatisfied. Saint draws his sword, and it's time to grind the ingredients. The saint admires his remarkable orb because it can slice food down to a microscopic level, and Vale is a little upset that the saint is being mistreated with her unholy greatsword. She cannot forgive Lord Saint. Upset, she plans to eat that dog thing. Dog food was prepared in a small barrel. Lord Saint says he cared for his dog's health, reduced excess fat, and added vegetables to keep the diet balanced. Lord Saint wondered if the dogs would like the food. His fears were proven wrong when they enjoyed it, and a voice suddenly distracted him. Vale had turned into a dragon and asked for some of the food, too. Svarti's Vadu couldn't do anything about it and asked Vale to return to her original form and stretch out her hands. He pours dog food into her palms. Vale looks at her palms full of dog food with bright eyes. She pounces on the treat immediately. She chooses the dog food carefully. It may be nutritious, she says, but it tastes more like animal feed. Suddenly her expression changes. Smiling slightly, she turned to one of the dogs, and even the dogs were scared by her look. She said she would tell them to eat as much as they wanted, and since then Vale has not eaten dog food because it was tasteless. Some voices are curious about this settlement. They cannot tell what fruits, berries, or vegetables grow on these bushes. Some note this never happened even on the estates of the rich or of demons. They see someone tending the fields. A gang member picks a fruit and tastes it. That member asks his boss to try it, and the boss feels his cheeks go numb. These fruits taste incredible. The boss will try them too. Suddenly she realizes she cannot identify the aroma hidden in this wonderful fruit. It is too tasty for her. A servant of one of the bosses reports the territory is being watched and noticed several houses with strange architecture and gardens, making the village feel more like a farm, especially because of the mysterious harvest. The group assumes aristocrats live here, and if that's true, it makes sense to them that these fields are in the middle of nowhere. A member of the group doesn't know what to do with all this, and the boss says there's probably treasure hidden in this territory. Missing this golden opportunity would ruin their reputation as successful thieves. The boss calls himself Thunder Freezers, and they will clear out the mansion and take all the valuables. The boss suddenly spots something. One of the Lord Saint's dogs watches them from the bushes, while inside the building the servant girl draws magic circles in the sky. She was checking the waypoints because none of them looked normal. Belena says her job is maintaining the waypoints for His Majesty the Demon King and for the Demon Queen Misastris. Calling the job pointless, she says she only managed to sing one song, so she ended up helping everyone and everything. She had worked under the Demon King before moving here. 3 mermaids now handle part of the work in areas with labor shortages, which has greatly reduced her workload, and lately the servants have had too much free time. Clenching her fist, she says this is very, very bad, then falls into thought and warns that if it continues she will lose everything and be left without a job. Determined to do something, she asks Lord Saint for a job, searches the mansion, and finally finds him making pottery. The servant interrupts, not understanding what the Holy Lord is doing. The Holy Lord says he is making a pot, meaning he is shaping a bowl from clay. He says the dishes are made of mana metal, so he figured it was time to get some real pottery. The servants finally realized they had been dining on dishes made of precious metals. The saint notes that hand molding takes a long time, so he decides the pot needs reshaping and turns it, and suddenly the servant understands. Balina is eager to help the Light Lord, and the servant admires her zeal, but warns the work is very labor-intensive and says the Holy Lord can still use her. Belina says she actually has psychokinesis. Later, when she gives a pebble some magic, it starts to move. At least that's the only magic she can do with a single pebble. Placing it on a rotating machine, she secures it with clay and says a prayer. With his arms outstretched, the forward-rotating machine begins to spin, and the Holy Lord is pleased with the work of the henbane, and it spins faster and faster until the clay that stood on the machine flies into the Holy Lord's face. Lore of the Color asks Henbane to slow down a bit, and Henbane apologizes. Lord Saint remarks that Henbane is working hard, but Henbane says she is not. She says she works very hard but still isn't as good as his girlfriend or others, and that she constantly needs help because she does not want to be left without a job. Lord Flower reassures her there is nothing to worry about and thanks her for helping with the pot. Henbane says the pot has turned into a pancake and she could not do anything else. Lord Saint asks Henbane to work together to solve everything. She smiles at his words. Later they end up with a dented cup. Bellina wants to break it, but Lord Saint stops her. Anna reminds her that the first pancake is always lumpy and tells her not to be upset. He insists something can still be done, but Henbane warns him not to back her so strongly. A friend calls out and distracts them. The wolves barked wildly, so they ran toward the cries. They'd rounded up and bound a group of thieves, so Lars asks Okubo to explain, and Okubo says they found a band of elven thieves on their farm. Elves were like demons, but evolved separately throughout history, and Lord Saint believed they were allies of his servants, though she says elves do not interact with humans or demons. The servants learned that many Elysian bandit groups were raiding indiscriminately, earning a bad reputation with both humans and demons. They likely hide in a shelter no one can reach, which makes them hard to catch. The saint appears and says they probably live in the mountains, which are very isolated from the rest of the world. Turning to a group of thieves, he says they must have been surprised when they found their farm. The boss asks the Lord Saint who they are, and the saint replies that his name is Saint Kidden, and that this is where Saint Kidden settled. Some of you are whispering that Kidden is human, and you don't understand why a demon is with him, or that everyone else in the village is a monster. Holy Lord, you know these thieves are still confused. Turning to the orc, he asks what they did. The orc says they stole tomatoes from their farm. Another girl cuts off the orc story, and the princess and her dragon come to the noise, furious that the orcs ate their tomatoes, so Vale immediately turns into a dragon and says the orcs deserve to be destroyed. Sveta knows Vale can no longer be stopped. The princess says this is their problem and adds that if they do not allow them to leave unpunished, there is no guarantee that this will happen again. Vale orders the thieves executed so everyone knows the consequences of invading their property. The thieves are stunned and terrified. They begin to cry and beg for forgiveness, saying they will end their careers immediately, and Belena's friend remembers seeing this group in the archives and says it is meant only for rich celebrities and traders. They hunted corrupt aristocrats who filled their pockets with taxes and bribes, and the demon King Zedin exposed and disgraced those nobles. Vale says the invaders should not be executed and asks the thieves to prepare. The Lord of Color pauses and then agrees with the princess. Lord Saint is about to sentence the elven bandits who stole 8 tomatoes from their farm and tells them this is a serious crime. So they would all work for them. Bellina listened closely to Lord St. Kedden's story, but afterward her expression changed and she looked perplexed.